All right. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Monday, the 21st of October, which is the first day of early voting here in Florida. I got my ballot, and this guy we're talking to here is on it. And believe me, he has got a district the size of Massachusetts, which is the reason why we've had so much trouble trying to get him on. He's kind of busy covering that whole damn district. So let's talk about that and the other just things that are important to you on the rotation. Hit the music. In my soul, you're a corner in my heart. It is so exciting to be on the first day of early voting. I mean, it has been so long in coming. Why do we have to have like a 4-year presidency and a 3.5-year campaign cycle? It just seems to be the way it is, and it gets exhausting. I mean, I am absolutely exhausted from this election cycle so far. I don't know if everybody else feels the same way or not.
I feel the same way. I'm just tired of talking to people about politics at this point. It's so illogical now. Well, it's so bad.
Here's the bottom line. Like, something that we've been talking about the last couple of days. Nobody can tell you how to vote. Not your spouse, not your crazy uncle with the red hat.
But
not anybody, and least of all us. We did, however, post a list of endorsements. Mm-hmm. This is our endorsements that we created by putting out surveys to all the candidates and looking at their voting records and trying to connect with them to see if they're the ones you should vote for. These are not mandates. These are recommendations. And as a 501c4, this is what we do. We had some people complaining there were too many Dems on our list. Well, we didn't do that by design. We didn't do that by design. This is what happened when we put the surveys out, who responded to us, and how their voting records look. And there are Republicans on there. There's a Libertarian on there. There's even a write-in candidate because we just can't see any way we could possibly endorse Kim Daniels if she keeps on telling everybody that thank God for slavery and why talk about the Holocaust when the Jews own all the money. Just saying. It's kind of a no-brainer for us at that point in time. So we made these decisions not lightly. And one of the people that we endorsed is this guy right here. So let me introduce ourselves first. My name is Gary Stein. I'm your political director here at Suncoast Normal and the master of public health. Where's the applause?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, Daryl, that looks so much better. And in the lower left-hand corner, our deputy director and our master of business administration and owner of Chillum CBD dispensary and mushroom shop in both Ybor City and St. Pete, Carlos Angel Armida.
Wait, I want to do you again. I want to do you.
Okay. Master of public health.
They do love that.
In the upper left-hand corner, coming to us from above the Beltway, where he hits them below the Beltway, Christopher Cano, our executive director and master of public administration, and we three are the masters of cannabis.
Yay!
And our special guest is somebody who, if you look up Florida civil rights attorneys, he tends to be at the top of the list. Now, he worked with Ben Crump. Well, the only problem I have with Ben is that my wife's last name is Zimmerman, and she has to apologize to practically everybody because of that one particular guy in Seminole County who really did blow it for a lot of people. Oh, that's a great shot. That's a wonderful shot.
I remember being an intern in Tallahassee in 2009 in Parks and Crump. That was the premier firm when you wanted to know of who was the mover and shaker in that town. So,
thank you, very gracious.
Well, one thing that your office needs, and this is again a district the size of Massachusetts, it covers practically the entire top of the state and includes Tallahassee, is somebody who is involved in civil rights, because that's something you don't see enough of coming out of our state capital.
That's right. Well, without question, I mean, you talk about the attack on voting rights by state government over the last few years. I mean, whether it's the voting rights, trying to decrease the opportunity for people to protest, threatening jail for them, just a real assault on individual rights. In fact, I spoke to a group yesterday about that, a group of young Democrats, about as students having free speech and having your voices heard is everything, especially for people at that point in their lives. So obviously that's my past, and I think that's a big part of the past of advocacy for students at both FAMU, other schools in the state, and across the country.
Oh yes, by the way, he's a rattler, so don't mess with him, okay? That's what it comes down to.
And Daryl, I know you're gonna be busy. Rattler homecomings this weekend, isn't it?
No, it's no. The bad part, homecoming wasn't bad. Well, not bad. It's good. Homecoming is actually leading into the election day. It's November.
Okay. So it's like that's right. It's like a week-long process.
Yeah, and luckily for me, my whole family will be in town for homecoming and stand for the election. So I have to win this election because my whole family will be present.
Absolutely. And one of the few things that the Florida legislature did as far as civil rights is concerned is to set up the Mary program over at FAMU, which helps educate folks who may have been disenfranchised, et cetera, in regards to minorities as far as cannabis is concerned. And I hope that program is going strong. It's had a lot of challenges, and you had some issues in regards to changing out the president and all that bit over there. So we're glad that at least they did that little tiny thing. But so much more needs to be done as far as civil rights is concerned, especially in the cannabis program. Number one, as you know, people of a minority status, there's no way they can get into the cannabis market as it currently stands. Right now, you have to have approximately $50 million to get it if you get a license. And the license they were supposed to have distributed to a member of a Black Farmers Association. Well, the guy died during the process because he was 90 years old. And they refused to let his descendants take that license. And the person they did give it to is getting ready to sell it. And so that's all in the courts right now. And with a program that's practically 7 years old right now, we still have no minority licenses. So we're grateful to somebody of your stature who understands civil rights like you do can get in there, because that is so desperately needed in Tallahassee. What made you decide to go from advocating for each individual person to going to the house and going for the big picture?
Well, without question, guys, I think overall, I'm a Floridian first and foremost, right? And so I've sat, listened, and watched what is going on in our state. And if you love this state, and if you care about people, you can't be happy about where we are and how things are being done to this state and to the people in this state. And I realized that my past and my history and my profile, I'm the type of person that could do something about getting in and having a different voice that's vocal and influential into what's going on in our state. So that's what I decided to do. And we're at a point where Ben and I just broken up our old firm. So I my business interests are kind of a little bit more diverse than they were back when I was in the firm. And I had a chance to focus on these issues. So that's what I decided to do, to change the narrative in the conversation starting in the northern part of the state where I live.
I mean, one thing the legislature does not do well is implementation. I would say, for example, the Anderson case that you were so pivotal in, about that 14-year-old who died in juvie boot camp. Was that a policy that was a bad policy, or was it bad implementation?
Probably a little bit of both. I think whoever thought it was a good idea to have sheriff's departments handling juveniles in boot camps probably didn't think that's probably not a good idea. But two, though, in terms of how you implement that policy once you have those juveniles within your custody, sensitivity to health issues, because the Martin Anderson issue was one that dealt with the health issue also. Yeah, it dealt with a situation where a person was overly exerted, but also too, you have to have a respect for the health issues that you may be dealing with. And in Martin Anderson's case, The sickle cell issue was an issue that was somewhat there, and that coupled with a bad policy gave us a bad outcome, along with some very bad behavior.
I've also noticed that among football programs across the state, high school football programs, they never demand sickle cell testing prior to people getting involved, and there has been deaths involved in regards to that as well.
Yeah, well, the other piece is this, and I don't know if you guys know it, but I chair the Sickle Cell Foundation here in Tallahassee, and I have chaired it for 25 years. So I have 25 years of experience with sickle cell. And if you saw my aunt, my daughter, I had a daughter that had the bad version of sickle cell 14 years ago. We went through a bone marrow transplant. But there's plenty of education and knowledge that can be shared both with the greater community as well as the African American community and other communities that tend to be more susceptible to sickle cell as a disease. So there's a lot of work there that needs to be done. I think that the legislature would tell you that they did some work on this past year. I think they've just started to touch the surface of the level of education that should be there. I think a person with my experience, I bring a plethora of information to the table as the legislator. As you know, often the case in the legislature, people will depend upon what some lobbyist is saying, and oftentimes that information may hit the mark, may not hit the mark, and so I think it's always great to have folks sitting in the chairs who bring probably equal, almost the same experience as those who have testified before them.
Well, I wanted to point out for our viewers, you're running against an incumbent who was personally recruited by Ron DeSantis, and when you see people who typically owe their, I would say, status or elected office to the leadership, then they tend to have a fall in line lockstep. So there's no real independent thinking. There's no real going out on a limb for the people. And so I'm glad that we have you running in this seat, because it gives an opportunity to the people to have a choice to vote for someone who's not going to fall in line with Ron DeSantis's agenda. And that's an issue that we have as an organization, because Governor DeSantis consistently during this campaign cycle has harped on the dangers of marijuana, the smell of marijuana, but he's not done anything to actually improve the medical marijuana system beyond his initial executive order allowing for flower-based products. He's not done anything to address or push the legislature around worker protections. Nothing to protect medical marijuana patients from discrimination in medical treatment, like being kicked off an organ transplant list or being kicked out of your nursing home or being kicked off your pain management plan. He's done nothing to address the issues of, not having your medical marijuana status used against you in a custody hearing, or having your kids taken away, or being investigated by CPS, nor has he issued out the constitutionally mandated additional 20-some licenses to create a diverse medical marijuana market. So it really, we have a lot of gripes on the governor and the fact that his lockstep cronies have not done anything to address this. And so I just wanted to throw it in your court, Daryl, as to, some of these things I just mentioned. How do you see yourself being able to, implement that or impact public policy when it comes to, the shortcomings of our medical marijuana system?
Well, I guess you guys may not know. Let me go ahead and divulge something. So one of a person I know in my community here in Tallahassee, when the first medical licenses were granted by the state, I was actually on an advisory committee for that license. So I've been deep in this issue, aware of the issue from the beginning. And so I think that given just the information that I've learned through that process, and obviously knowing people who are deeply involved with it, I come to it with something that is squarely on my radar screen, and a whole bunch of perspective that I can add to the conversation.
Now, we want to know what your opinion is on the current Amendment 3. You've had a chance to read it.
4.
Yeah, 3 and 4.
Yeah.
Definitely, we're in favor of 4. I got 3 daughters. I definitely believe in 4. But as far as 3 is concerned, which is having to do with adult use, cannabis use in the state of Florida, we want to know where you stand on this. We as a group stand on it because of it. We want to reduce the amount of arrests for possession that happen day in and day out. And yet, I don't see anything on that amendment that will reduce the amount of people who might get arrested for use, not just possession, on any of these pretextual traffic stops, which are still prevalent across the state.
Well, let me say my support is on a macro level, right? I think generally speaking, it needs to pass. I have not looked in detail at the things within it in terms of the execution. So that's something we'll take a look at. But I will say this, as I said the other day in the debate. Generally speaking, I want to protect whatever the voters supported. I think the legislature has to be a little careful before we act to do anything that the voters didn't intend. So if there's some ambiguity that has to be addressed legislatively, okay, we can address that. But generally speaking, I want to honor what the voters believe they voted for versus us second guessing or doing the we know best thing that we commonly see in Tallahassee.
Now, we generally voted for the felons regaining their voting rights a couple of years ago,
Right.
and that wasn't implemented as well as we'd expected it to.
Not at all. Well, one, because politically, I think there's a group of folks down in Tallahassee who decided that it wasn't in their best interest to have a whole bunch of fellows really get their right backs. So it was clear in that situation they were second guessing the voters and continue to second guess the voters on that issue.
Well, we saw the same thing with Amendment 2 with medical marijuana. Joe Redner actually sued, won in the lower courts, lost in the higher courts. But, the idea that you should have whole access to the plant and the right to grow it at home. And that's not what we got with the implementation of Amendment 2. And, that's been a criticism of Amendment 3. But, to the viewers and listeners out there, we understand that every other adult use amendment has been shot down by this conservatively stacked Supreme Court that Ron DeSantis appointed. Amendment 3 was written specifically to be able to pass the litmus test of this court, one of the most conservatively stacked courts in the country. And it did. But it had to be so narrow and single issue in mind that it strictly just allows for adults 21 and up to essentially get over-the-counter access without a doctor's recommendation from the existing licensed entities. And it does have a caveat in there that the legislature could license other entities. And that's something that, again, we're going to need the right folks in office who have their head in the game. And Daryl, you've been on it from the get-go, like you said, from that original licensing committee. So, we're definitely going to want to see some type of way where other businesses can get into this. The vertical integration in Florida seemed to be a safeguard measure. But in actuality, what we've seen is it almost has created an oligopoly in a lot of ways, where there's only a handful of businesses running things. And it just, small business owners like Carlos will never really get the opportunity to get into the industry unless we do break up vertical integration.
I can see that.
Yeah, I just want to point out a few things on what you said, Cano. Basically about this whole we shouldn't vote for Amendment 3 because there's no home grow. First off, regulate Florida.
That won't stop them, though. Hey,
sorry, guys. I just want to rant about this. But no, regulate Florida was up for review by the Supreme Court of Florida. They had a petition that it did two things. It aimed to legalize marijuana and it aimed to legalize home grow. Right? Denied. Single subject rule. You can't have home grow in there if you want to legalize marijuana. So we've seen this before by the Supreme Court. And second, there was an organization called WISE that sprouted out at the same time Smart and Safe Florida came out. And this organization was dedicated to producing an amendment with a single subject rule of growing cannabis, being able to grow cannabis at home. And nobody seemed to give a shit then. Yeah. So, I mean, this is what we got right now. We shouldn't avoid from taking a step forward because we can't have everything that we want. We should still move forward, guys. I'm tired of being stagnant.
One thing I found out going through the court system, and I helped with Joe Redner with some of his bills and helped write the Flora Grown bill, which was magnum opus. And but the situation is that a single word can kill a bill based on how the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeals wants to change it. And in fact, the home grow bill that Joe Redner had was knocked down because of the word use. Just one word, use.
Yeah.
As to what use meant. Did it mean you could grow? Did it mean you could possess? Did it mean you could actually use it in public? And that's what my concern is right now. Yes, Amendment 3 does allow for possession and sales, and it says that specifically. But it doesn't say anything about public use. And yet I saw a TV ad the other day. I had sent this to Carlos to take a look at, where this woman claimed that it definitely says that they can create a situation that would prevent public use, and she wants to be able to smoke anywhere she wants. Well, right now, public use is already illegal. It was made illegal when we went through medical cannabis.
And Gary, fun fact, public use is illegal in Colorado. If you ever go to a 420 festival out there, you'll get $1,000 ticket for smoking a joint at a Bob Marley and the Wailers concert. I've seen it happen to people. But for some reason, people think that, just because a state legalizes adult use, that all of a sudden it becomes this mecca of being able to, treat it like it's the 1969 again. And this, that's just not the case. And so, Amendment 3 is, like Carlos said, it's a first step. It's not the last step. It's not a giant leap. Daryl, you know this better than most. When it came to civil rights, the Civil Rights Act of 64 and the Voting Rights Act of 65, there wasn't everything in one get-go. It took steps of legislation that had to be rolled out for folks to be able to get to where they want to get to. And on this topic that you touched on, Gary, when it comes to searches, there is still a disproportionate amount of Black and Latinos in America stopped, even in legal states, on the highway. Still get their cars searched, still get their cars tossed. What some of that could cut down on of those searches is, like they've done in Maryland, like they've done in Virginia, is that if we toss the smell of cannabis out as probable cause, and they've had to do that via legislation. Other states like Tennessee have upheld the smell of cannabis because folks were arguing that, it's hemp products. And so, there is that issue of whether or not we should continue to have a drug dog be able to come by your car and get your car tossed for the smell of marijuana. So, Daryl, that's something that the legislature, may also have on their hands. And we like to highlight to all of our candidates the different issues that folks have talked to us and the different issues that other states have seen, moving forward. So, your freshman class will definitely have a lot on its plate going in after this election.
So true. I'm sure that there are folks out there, especially the folks who are on both sides of this, have a ton of issues that they probably plan to bring forth after this thing passes the general election.
Now, I'm not trying to get too political as far as the other party is concerned, but they seem to be in an awful lot of denial. And
I would say cognitive dissonance, but it will go with denial.
I would go with cognitive dissonance and denial. How about that?
All right.
But the fact is, we do know that a disproportionate number of people with color will be pulled aside for pretextual stops, which eventually end up in arrests. Has that gotten any better in the last couple of years, or gotten worse in Florida?
Well, I think it's always bad. The unfortunate part in our state is, in some situations, we create a situation where officers are encouraged to stop people for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. You see it as you drive down the street, on the highways especially, the level of targeting folks and who they decide to stop for whatever reason. So unfortunately, that's built into what happens on the highway. And there's very little out there to resist it. And you see it throughout the country too. Now, it's not just Florida. You see it in other states too, where a certain group is far more targeted on the highways. Otherwise, you would think that the only speeders happen to have, most people of color. Only a certain group of folks get stopped. So when we know speeders come in all shapes and sizes.
Yeah, there was one speeder I remember they pulled over a couple of years ago who happened to be a state representative who happened to be in charge of a lot of big committees. This guy used to be ER physician, and he had a half-finished bottle of wine in his seat. He was whipping back and forth, but for some odd reason, he didn't go to jail.
You figure, you know why? And once the cops figured it out, they probably took a different avenue.
Well, we have discretion on the part of policemen all the time. I mean, Kano and Chris and I, and Carlos and I worked on getting civil citations here in Hillsborough County, and even with that discretion involved, there's still a lot of people who were not given civil citations, but were actually getting arrested, and a lot of it had to do with, I guess, the mindset of the policemen involved. I'm not going to say racist per se, but is that possible?
Well, I think when you start talking discretion on the side of the road, discretion is discretion, and we give it to who we want to give it to.
I guess my concern is that with adult use, we've been pushing for reciprocity for years, so that tourists who come down here, whose grandmother is using it for her cancer or Parkinson's and things of that sort, could get arrested when they come down here, or when they try to sneak it through TSA. And we're thinking, well, hopefully this will make things better because they can actually buy it here. But I see our tourists being pulled over and arrested for use in their cars, just because there might be a scent of cannabis in the car, like what Chris was saying. Because right now, the scent of cannabis is still due cause.
Wow. Well, we do all want to say to all the viewers, we don't support getting behind the wheel intoxicated in any way, shape, or form. But we also understand that, it can still be on your clothes. If you happen to smoke in your car, those are all different things. So protect yourselves. Be an intelligent consumer. Normal supports the freedom and civil rights of all responsible cannabis users. Responsible is the key word in that. And be smart. Know your surroundings. Know where you are. Know what you're doing. But we're going to continue to do everything we can to make sure folks are safe. Now, again, the federal illegal status of cannabis as a Schedule I drug, and even if the December 2nd hearings by the DEA decide to change that to Schedule III, there still is this issue of crossing across state lines with it. So you're going to have Georgia troopers waiting for you coming into Florida. You're going to have troopers waiting for you when you cross that border coming out of Florida. These are things to think about. Interstate 95 is the drug highway of America. They come in through the port of Miami, and it goes all the way up. The traffickers drive illegal drugs, illicit drugs, all the way up to Maine. So there's this issue. But what we do have with Amendment 3 in other states as well, 25 states to date, essentially half the country, is that domestic cannabis markets have severely impacted those illicit markets from other countries, from whether it's Mexican cartels or Colombian cartels. We can produce homegrown cannabis here in America at much higher quality and much better prices than any of the illicit cartels can do. And that's the issue that we want to caution our government on, is that they see tax revenues on this. But if you overtax it, like we've seen in certain states like California, you're going to drive people back into the illicit market. So, Daryl, one of the things that, you all are going to probably address is, what's the tax rate going to be? And that's a major concern folks have, because one, the medical system, you don't pay taxes on medicine in Florida, but an adult use system, it's no longer medicine. So there's going to be a tax on it. It could be local taxes, state taxes, county taxes, but the tax rates are going to drive people back into the illicit market and away from safe and unregulated products. And that's going to be a concern that definitely we're going to share, is we want safe, regulated products. People want that peace of mind. I mean, there's also been criticism in the Wall Street Journal recently of the current medical marijuana players in Florida, and how 80% of their tested samples fail for safety when it comes to mold, pesticides, heavy metals, all those other things.
Wow. Well, without question, that's a treasure trove of issues that we're going to have to deal with. I'll say this here. If you guys probably know, one thing I didn't say earlier is on the educational side. I'm closely associated with FAMU, so the educational part of this at FAMU, the Mary program, I know a lot of people personally with this Dr. Green Powell. I think they have a consultant firm here in Tallahassee working with them. I think I saw a young lady at large. She's with Salters Mitchell. I saw her the other day, and we're talking about just some of their efforts in getting the proper messaging out on this. So it's close to where I live. I live right by FAMU. And so a lot of the people who are playing a very personal role in day-to-day of folks that I know and see. So as a person coming into the legislature after I win this election, I'm going to build on those relationships. One, to come up to speed on where things are. Two, find ways that I can be helpful in that regard. So I'll use the cool thing about being in Tallahassee. Most of the government is here. Most folks come here to deal with government. And whereas I often see folks from other parts of the state have to come here to try and get closer to the action, I live where the action is. So I can get in my little truck and be downtown in about 8 minutes.
Yeah, I dread the drive to Tallahassee, and I don't know. Yeah, you can stay up there. I'll stick to Tampa.
Well, I'll say this here: Tallahassee's been spared all the hurricanes, so.
Yeah, that's true. We are kind of screwed up down here in Tampa right now.
Yeah, I look at the climate change maps. Other than Mount Dora, Tallahassee is the only other spot that doesn't get sucked up under the ocean in the next 100 years.
Well, they're kind of high on the hill up there, you know. That does make a big difference. Daryl, I got a couple of people posting on my Facebook the other day saying, "Can you tell me why we should vote for Kamala Harris without mentioning Trump?" And I said, no, you can't do that because it's a choice between two people, not a choice just of one. Anybody who has a vote between at least two parties. That's how we got set things up. So you have an opponent. I call him the Herschel Walker of the Tallahassee Senate. But I mean, we had an issue with him in the last election where he mentioned the fact that he was having an anxiety attack. He got himself a D8 gummy from somewhere, maybe a gas station or something. And he said he had an anxiety attack and he had to rush himself to the hospital to get his stomach pumped. Of course, by the time that he got to the hospital, most likely the stuff was in his bloodstream anyway, if he was feeling anything from it. But obviously he was not educated enough to utilize the medicine. And yet he was speaking out against it. And that's my concern. We'd like to make certain we have our legislators educated. What do you see as a difference between you and your opponent?
On which issue? I mean, in general?
pick your favorite.
Well, a couple of things, man. You know, we probably the only thing we have is similar in common is we black, okay, and big guys. It stops there. My life has been spent really working for Floridians and getting involved in situations and cases in people's lives where they were in big fights against big institutions, knowing with their life on the line. And so we built a firm that got very deep into cases, whether it's, you know, we did things like voting rights stuff, pro bono for Madison 9, got involved in recounts in Gadsden County when Morris Young was under threat for sheriff in the recount, to getting out here and representing these cases against whether it's, you know, police department, sheriff's department, Department of Corrections, major hospitals when they did people wrong. When you live a life of dealing with life and death stuff, you tend to see things as life and death as very serious. And normally those situations involve somebody who's up against an institution. And institutions have unlimited money. And normally the last fight you ever want to be in is a fight against an institution, because they have enough money to fight you forever. And you are just a person. So all you have is your humanity. All you have is the one life you have, and you got to deal with things. So my life has been spent working on those life and death things. And I often think about the cases where people lost their lives that I was involved with, and I may have had to do an autopsy. And I'm looking at the person laying on the table who's dead. And I'm trying to figure out what happened to them so that I can properly tell their story. And so when you live that life, and you see that person's body laying there, and you're trying to figure out what happened to them, and was it wrong, and does our society and our laws offer an answer for that? And that's serious shit, y'all. Okay, that ain't a day at the park. Okay, that ain't a day at the park. That's some serious stuff that's happened. So Normally, you've had some alleged police investigation, you've had an autopsy, you've had a family or a person that had no answers, and that came and talked to someone like Ben and I. And we decided that we thought it was important that we would invest our time and energy. And let me say, there ain't a bunch of money in that kind of work, y'all. That's the biggest lie told out there, right? You don't hear about it. For as many deaths you hear that go on involving institutions and law enforcement organizations, there's no truckloads of money being given to those families. So don't believe that lie, okay? But what you do have is a bunch of people losing their lives in many situations. And unfortunately, the calling card has been from one side of our community that you're supposed to support the law enforcement no matter what. And I support law enforcement, but I also, better put, I support equal justice on the law. Equal justice on the law. And that's the hallmark of the system. It ain't whatever this guy says is true and whatever the other guy says is not true. No. We have a system that requires justice be equally given and administered. And so we take that for granted because we get scared into, you got to support this guy if he's a function in the process, one function. There are multiple people who play a role in that process. I was honored in my life to be able to be a person or a citizen that could not do stuff for money, right? Because as a lawyer, you can do a lot of stuff to make a lot of more money than I made. But when you take on a situation where a person has lost their life or been severely hampered because of someone else, you are taking a different approach. And so I come to the table with a resume of doing serious stuff, laying my career on the line, and fighting for the lives of people. Most of the time it's not popular to do, because the easy thing to do is to say, I back the blue. Whatever they do is fine. Well, that's not proper law, and just take the blue out of it. We all ought to be for proper implementation of our laws, period, whatever that looks like. Now, proper implementation of our laws.
One thing I found out is our Sheriff's Association may be a group, but there's a lot of diversity within that group. The Sheriff of Gadsden County actually came out in favor of Amendment 3. Grady Judd over by our side of town, not so much. I mean, Chris has personally debated Grady on a number of occasions, and he came up with the idea that he had done a research of all the people who were in jail for cannabis possession and saw that the majority of them were violent felons. And so therefore he came to the conclusion that cannabis actually makes you into a violent felon.
Well, Gary, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's a kind of a good segue into one of the issues that Daryl touched on, in that institutions have unlimited dollars. And one of the institutions right now that's been running ads against Amendment 3, essentially, or rather about the harms of cannabis, is Ron DeSantis's Department of Transportation. And he got Grady Judd to get on there. And Grady, quote, said, "When we make home visits for domestic violence calls, they're often associated with marijuana use." And that's just like, Sheriff Judd, I've always found him to be a man of integrity, but I just can't square that away in that statement. And then you got Duval County Sheriff T.K. Waters saying that there are too many kids going to the ER because of weed gummies and joints laced with fentanyl. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the news in a 10-year study showing that that there's hardly any fentanyl in the cannabis in the grand scheme of things. It's one of those reefer madness talking points. And then you got the Brevard Sheriff Wayne Ivey saying that they see more traffic collisions and fatalities because of people driving high. And we've been on this show reporting plenty of times that in legal states we've seen the opposite, that the studies are showing that these things go down. But what this really ties into, and we're going to have a guest coming on in the coming weeks, who's a state senator that's suing the state over this, is that they're unconstitutionally using our tax dollars for political purposes to essentially scare folks off of Amendment 3 in a roundabout way on this. And so that's definitely, concerns that we have, and Daryl, you touched on a great point about it's not easy to take on established institutions. It's not easy to call things out, but we've seen it time and time again. Body cameras have really changed the game in policing in a lot of ways. And we've seen, uncouth things happen when folks didn't know that the cameras have an early record function and such, I've seen it from cops in Baltimore planning drugs and didn't know their cameras were on to, sheriffs in Florida in Jackson County, planning drugs on people who didn't have anything to do with it. So it's just sad to see that our institutions have grown so strong that to take them on and say we should have equal justice on the law makes people think like you're not patriotic, that you have to back the blue no matter what. And that's just, where are we in this society where, it's like everything is just an extreme. There's no middle ground anymore on things. There's no question that, it used to be, you used to question government and authorities. And now we have essentially folks on the right that have a cult leader running their party. You can tell the difference of them by their red hats. So Daryl, you've been on this earth longer than I have, and Carlos, what is your thoughts on it? Especially, you bring a unique perspective as a Black man to the situation and one that's been in the fight for civil rights.
Well, you watch the Republicans, and first they say they back the blue, and then as soon as something happens, the whole Secret Service ain't shit. So I mean, it's
or the
crazy,
FBI is
right?
corrupt, right?
Yeah, the FBI is corrupt. So, and luckily, you at least seeing some diversity in those levels of law enforcement. But I'll say this too: in my race, where, for example, most of the elected sheriffs have come out in favor of Corey Simon, I get a whole bunch of folks that work in the sheriff's department who approach me in public situations, say, "Hey, we all don't do what the sheriff does in politics. We with you." Because most of them know that I don't hate the police, right? I'm very supportive of law enforcement, and I'm for proper enforcement of the law. Mm-hmm. And I was talking with one sheriff the other day in one of the Panhandle counties. He never met me, right? But he endorsed my opponent. And after I talked with him for about 7-8 minutes, I think he realized I have far more in common with him than Corey Simon does. Mm-hmm. And so, unfortunately, the politics run so deep with some of those people. They're not open-minded people. They're politicians. They're not even really good law enforcement people. They're politicians. And so keeping, in that position, I would hope that their goal is to keep everybody safe, and they want everybody to have confidence in that department. Because when people start, not having confidence in law enforcement officers, it leads to a lot of other things. And so making sure once elected, you gotta, be there for everyone. And it's important. Y'all asked me earlier about the difference between the current senator and I. Another really big point is I probably care far more about other things in this area than he does, whether it's business development, public education. He talked about school choice, says nothing about the hit that public schools have taken as a result of some of his other policies, the lack of money that's coming to the public schools. Says nothing about it. I care. We mentioned that I do some work in sickle cell, but primary care is like a major issue that I care about deeply. You hear him talk about hospitals, but as you guys know, since y'all getting a little older now, when a person gets to the hospital, they're pretty sick. And so the key in life is to deal with whatever conditions that you happen to be dealing with before you get to the hospital so that you manage those conditions. So those are issues I care deeply about. I live that life and, that I'm really, really into.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because there's one thing that has bothered me is that I've got a great historical perspective in regards to how medicine has approached cannabis over the last century. And one of the things I actually found out in the 1800s was that cannabis was actually a good method to reduce what they call opioid poisoning, or reduce opioid withdrawal, to allow people to get off of opioid, morphine, whatever it was at the time. And yet we have a legislature that just made it so that if you are in a rehab facility, you can't use cannabis. So if you are trying to get off of opioids, they have taken a major possible solution away from you. And we're trying to find a way to get that back in because we still have an opioid epidemic in our state.
Yeah.
And it affects everybody of all races, economic status, things of that sort. And yet to have a solution that is being taken away just because of the fact that they don't like it is not following the science.
Indeed. And
how
Daryl,
can we go against that?
Well, Gary, we're gonna have to get folks like Daryl elected, and they're gonna have to pass a law to overturn it. But then, even then, we're gonna have to make sure that either DeSantis ain't in office when it happens, or have enough votes to override a veto. So the process is what it is.
Daryl, I spent a lot of time going back and forth between. That's the reason why I hate going up there. It's because I've spent a lot of time going back and forth between Tallahassee and Tampa the past 2 years. Particularly because of these hemp bills. And, two things that I noticed. One, I want to talk about your opponent in just a minute, but first, right, you really do, it really seems to me if people who vote Republican just look at how liberals and Republicans are using their vote, like legislators are using their vote, it really seems like Democrats have become almost the embodiment of what old school Republican values are: small business, free market. These are things that Democrats really have been fighting in Tallahassee to protect against these conservatives up there that are just kind of like your opponent, just kind of placed in there. They do what they're told. Right. The guy in charge has an agenda. Right. And I'll tell you what I mean. All these times that I went up to Tallahassee, right, I sat at these committee hearings, and Corey Simon was in these committee hearings, and he was quiet as fuck. He sat there and he listened, and at the end he voted no, he got out. Right. But there was one particular meeting this year. It was the first time it was heard in front of a Senate committee, right? And they were armed. You know what I mean? Like, they saw that we were fighting this hemp bill last year. They saw that we were even successful in getting it changed before anything was voted in or anything like that, right? And they were armed. They were ready. They knew our arguments. They had talking points. There was several senators all across this committee. Osgood was up there saying that you're going to get addicted to crack if you smoke hemp, and a number of different people were up there with their opinions, right? But this particular one was the one that Corey spoke, and he had this whole speech prepared about how he ate a gummy and how the person at the store didn't tell him, right? And yeah, he said start slow and build your way up, but he didn't really know what that meant, so he just ate a whole gummy. And then, oh my God, I'm freaking out. I gotta go to the hospital. Oh my God. And then they pumped my stomach. They pumped my stomach in the hospital. And this is the reason why. I mean, this guy's a fucking football player.
No, you can't tell me a Florida State football player from the 90s didn't try a weed brownie in college. Come on, I'm calling bullshit.
You can't tell me a guy that's been hit in the head that much eats 10 milligrams, and then all of a sudden, I don't know where I am. Oh my God. Granted, right, if granted, people consume edibles, they need to be educated, right? If you're eating 100 milligrams and you're a lightweight, you're not going to have a very good time. But I mean, come on, dude. Like, this guy is up there lying out of his ass, right? Just doing what he's supposed to do, what he's told to do. And, this is the reason why we need to get people like you up there, people who are educated, people who know the law, people that know what people need.
And people who can handle their edibles.
Yeah.
But on that note, Daryl, why don't you go ahead and close us out? I know you're busy, man. You got a huge district to campaign on. Why don't you tell the voters at home why they should support you and how they can support you, where to go to?
So, supporters, you guys, if you want to support my campaign, it's a great campaign. We're going to flip the seat from Republican to Democrat. And things are going really well. Go to darylforflorida.com, darylforflorida.com if you want to help my campaign. I represent far better North Florida values than my opponent, and I'll be a great senator. I'll be a friend to folks. I won't say which family member, but I have family members who have been enjoying good cannabis all my life, so I'm used to the smell, and so. They haven't.
Have you ever partaked, by the way?
It has not had a negative effect on their life. I'll leave it at that. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you so
much.
We
appreciate you, Daryl. And with that, team, I think it's time to go to our news segment.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Daryl.
Bye-bye.
All right, so jumping in here at the top of the news, as I touched on earlier, Ron DeSantis, according to Marijuana Moment, is stirring the pot again with more anti-marijuana ads, but these are being funded by the taxpayers through the Department of Transportation, and Senator Jason Pizzo actually is filed a lawsuit against that. We're actually going to have Senator Pizzo come on the rotation here the weekend before the election on November 3rd, so pretty excited for that. But in the Marijuana Moment article, we actually saw that there are two key polls that folks should be aware of. Number one is the James Madison Institute showing 64% of likely voters in Florida are in favor of Amendment 3. But the recent poll put out by the Florida Chamber of Commerce, which again is against Amendment 3, found that 59% of likely voters in the state back Amendment 3. So you have the folks against it. Even their own polling shows it, right at the threshold. It needs to have 60% to pass. So if you're someone who's sitting at home and you're thinking, I'm a pot smoker, I don't really get politically active, it'll pass, I'll be fine. No, that's not what's going to happen. If you support ending people getting arrested for cannabis and you want to vote for Amendment 3, get off the couch and go do that. Early voting has already started in Florida. You can go to the Florida Division of Elections, go to your local county supervisor of elections website, find out the early voting sites, and take a picture ID with a signature and go ahead and cast your ballot. If you want to vote by mail, you have until 5 o'clock on Thursday to request your vote by mail ballot. So get out there, go ahead, sign up, and get up and vote. This election is going to make all the difference, and sitting at home is not going to make any change. So moving on, Marijuana Moment has a lot of great things, and usually I read the normal news, but one key headline that really touched me that I saw was maternal marijuana use is not tied to child autism or developmental delays. And this is coming from a federally funded study published by the American Medical Association. So understanding that there are 2 federally funded reports published in the Journal of the American Medical Association that may help at least, allay some of the concerns that people have around prenatal exposure. For years, people would cite the study that was done in Jamaica, a 30-year study of that. But now we actually have data showing, that pregnancies from 2011 to 2019 that were exposed, in utero to cannabis didn't show any increases associations with autism spectrum disorder, and that, folks can be concerned about language disorders or motor delays and that sort of thing. And these were funded by the National Institute of Drug Abuse. Often it's ironic, but this is the same thing we've seen time and time again. The federal government will fund studies hoping it returns a negative result on marijuana use, and the studies, oftentimes science comes back the other way and shows that it does not. So that's definitely something to think about, because when it comes to government, as our guest touched on, there oftentimes seems to be large and almost unlimited budgets to try and shoot things down that they don't want. And you actually have several states this election going to the ballot, like Florida. Arkansas has a medical marijuana measure on the ballot, and a conservative group in Arkansas is saying that essentially it's going to make Arkansas a drug use destination state, according to the Family Council Action Committee. And they're essentially also trying to make folks extremely wary about the influx of illegal immigrants bringing drugs into the state, and that there's going to be a permanent monopoly of folks, essentially running the medical marijuana in that state, and that children are going to be harmed, from advertising weed to them. There's so many things that's just wrong with where we're at right now with the reefer madness, repeating things that have been debunked time and time again in every single state. And this is definitely something that is going to continue. We just have to continue to do our best as voters to be educated on it. But, all hope is not lost. Most recently, Puerto Rico's governor has come out and said he broadly supports decriminalization. Governor Pedro Pierluisi of the New Progressive Party on this past Thursday said while he's committed to addressing the fentanyl issues that the island has, he wants to continue to prosecute those involved in the legal distribution of drugs. He doesn't agree that people who use them should be incarcerated. And so this whole over incarcerating target cannabis users is something that the governor of Puerto Rico is finally coming around and seeing that decriminalization can be done to a certain extent with care and controls, to not encourage drug use, but if anything, to discourage it, but not continue to waste tax dollars to lock people up for it. Now, on the other hand, you have the U.S. Army coming out with an updated drug policy explicitly banning Delta-8 THC hemp products and even warning soldiers against consuming poppy seed bagels, which can create false positives when testing for opioids. And so the Army's substance misuse guidance took effect October 4th. And with respect to Delta-8 components, it represents one of the latest examples of how government and private institutions are attempting to navigate this legal gray area that was created by the 2018 Farm Bill that Trump signed into law. Now, understanding that the use of products derived from hemp may be federally legal for civilians, but is still prohibited for soldiers, and that Delta-8 products can cause you to test hot. And then the Army also has been looking at non-intoxicating CBD, and those CBD products, whether injected, inhaled, or otherwise introduced to the human body, food products, transdermal patches, etc. Of course, they're addressing with the punitive measures of that. But again, if you're a soldier, cannabis has no place, according to the Army, for you in your body, even with the current legal status that we have. So,
but I mean, that's always been the case, though. I mean,
yeah.
The issue is not necessarily the that they're banning Delta-8. It's the issue is that the drug tests can't tell the difference.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so the operational readiness of our armed forces always remains a major concern for folks. One of the things that I like to see happen with the Doobie Act being passed, and I brought this up to senators and such, they want to make sure that people can still serve and get security clearances of the federal government with past marijuana use. I'm interested to see what happens to those soldiers, airmen, and such who had dishonorable discharges because of it, and whether or not there'll be anything retroactive. So, should legislation pass that changes the status of things, and so there's a lot to be said about our veterans, armed forces. We talk about our vets so much when it comes to cannabis use, but the paperwork and how folks' discharges are affected by cannabis use while they were in uniform is definitely something to be addressed. Now, I do want to go back to a recent report and analysis that was published in the Lancet Regional Health America's Journal that showed a 10-year analysis that fentanyl seldom is identified in illicit cannabis samples. Now, this is coming out of Harvard Medical School. Researchers reviewed drug chemistry results from nearly 12 million samples of illicit substances seized by law enforcement between 2013 and 2023, and they identified fentanyl in fewer than 2% of the samples tested. Fentanyl co-occurrence was most prevalent in heroin, but was low among non-opioid substances. Fewer than 3% of cocaine seizures tested positive for fentanyl. Only 1% of methamphetamine samples tested positive for it. Cannabis samples were least likely to test positive for fentanyl. Now, I know you're going to see a lot of ads, pro-Amendment 3, anti-Amendment 3, and they're going to talk about fentanyl being in the weed. Even Trump's VP pick, J.D. Vance, has come out and tried to scare people about fentanyl being in the marijuana. Look, the results are clear. There's no evidence of widespread fentanyl co-occurrence in cannabis. Plain and simple, that's Harvard Medical School. That's not normal.
Never
That's
made
not
sense.
anyone else, you know?
It just never made sense. So, I mean, I understand the concept that Gary's brought up in the past, that some could like waft in the air and land on your cannabis or something like that.
But that's all unregulated packaging institutions. You know, the guys sitting in their underwear.
Yeah, but
cutting it and putting it in little balloons.
As far as cross contamination goes, that's the least of their worries. Like literally, like maybe putting it in the same bag is probably the biggest issue. Where people that have pill presses that they press aftermarket drugs, and they press some fentanyl into something, and they don't fucking clean the machine.
Well, you know, Normal's opinion is clear from national all the way to our chapter. The best way to address any concerns you have about clean and safe cannabis is to take it off the street corners and put it behind the counter of a licensed business where they're lab tested and labeled accordingly. And I think that is definitely something that folks should consider in the grand scheme of things, you know, when it comes to whether or not they want to see Amendment 3 pass. It's like, do you want to deal with this or not? You know, there's a lot to be said around, you know, safe access to cannabis. Now, there is something that I read recently in the Journal of Social Psychiatry and Psychiatric Epidemiology, and it said that cannabis legalization is associated with fewer hospitalizations among schizophrenia patients. And this is research with the York University in Toronto that assessed, you know, emergency room related visits at a cohort of 121,061 patients with schizophrenia between 2015 and 2021. And that investigators identified decreases in cannabis-related emergency room visits in both men and women, and mental health-related visits, and cannabis and psychosis-related emergency room visits among schizophrenia patients in the years immediately following legalization. And this marked a reversal of pre-legalization trends that had shown a small month-to-month increase in cannabis-associated hospitalizations. And it said, you know, the conclusions were, despite higher baseline rates of acute care utilization among patients with schizophrenia, cannabis legalization was associated with significant reductions, particularly during phase 1. And our findings suggest that regulatory measures accompanying legalization could enhance the quality and safety of cannabis products, potentially leading to fewer adverse health outcomes in vulnerable patient populations. Furthermore, our study indicates that legalization and cannabis regulation in certain contexts may help reduce acute care utilization in vulnerable patient groups.
One thing I want to mention, and that is this has happened time and time again, where people do what is called conclusion bias, and they start with a conclusion and they work backwards. There was a study in the 50s, also in the 60s, that claimed that there was an association between psychosis and cannabis because they would find people in institutions and ask them if they've ever used cannabis or not. Well, if the answer was yes, they say, okay, obviously cannabis leads to psychosis. Whereas actually, these are people who are actually treating themselves, self-medicating in order to get rid of their psychosis, but they made the wrong conclusion.
Well, a lot of the schizophrenia psychosis literature that I read in recent years was coming out of the United Kingdom. But ironically enough, the member of parliament that was pushing that narrative has a spouse that's associated with GW Pharmaceuticals, which is trying to corner the cannabis market in England as they move to legalize it. So, you know, you got to watch where this info comes from. And then that stuff ends up getting translated, you know, overseas. And you have these supposed experts from Harvard or University of Florida, wherever they may come out of, pushing reefer madness, you know, type of issues as well. You know, all in all, there's tons of research. You can go to normal.org. You can read the Normal News and subscribe to each and every week. You can go to publications like Marijuana Moment and check them out. There is real work that is being done when it comes to cannabis research. You can go to pubmed.gov and do your own research, ladies and gentlemen, and find that there are tens of thousands of articles in regards to cannabis and you know, medical studies that make the difference. Now, why do organizations like us exist? Well, this latest a piece of tidbit of information that might have folks a little, you know, shook. Over 600 Americans each day are arrested for marijuana. Enough is enough. You know, with half the states moved to sensible, legalized, and regulated cannabis over the past decade, you still have many jurisdictions putting marijuana consumers in handcuffs. For example, in Alabama, nearly half of all drug arrests are for marijuana. In Georgia, 40% of drug arrests and drug violations are charged with violating marijuana laws. In Texas, almost 1/3 of all drug-related arrests are from minor marijuana violations. In Pennsylvania, 1 in 5 drug arrests are for marijuana. Nationwide, police made over 220,000 marijuana-related arrests in 2023, and that's according to the FBI's new crime in the United States report. And understand that states like Florida often fail to even report their numbers. So these numbers aren't even entirely accurate. But the fact is that that's still Americans too damn many. That's over 600 a day being charged with a criminal record, being fleeced for money, our tax dollars being spent and wasted. It's just a shame. And Amendment 3, again, is that first step that addresses that. Now, I do want to talk about something that recently came out in the Wall Street Journal, and it is a major concern for all of us, but it was that legal marijuana contains dangerous mold and states are approving it anyways. And a recent study came out that showed a disproportionate share of the samples that are reported to contain mold is either just under the legal limit, and that you have lab shopping among these major medical marijuana companies trying to get the results that they want. And, for all of the concerns that folks have around Amendment 3, with the legal marijuana industry backing it, this is a major concern that we have. And I hope that our candidates that we've had on, and the folks that are listening, and the folks that win their election that we didn't endorse, should things go a certain way, address this issue of making sure that there's integrity in laboratory testing in the state of Florida and when it comes to cannabis samples. Because again, as a medical marijuana state, it is safe access for our patients that should be the biggest concern. And if there is mold, pesticides, heavy metal, and aphids and other pests and such and parasites, that in itself is no good for medicine for sick people, for cancer patients, for Alzheimer's patients, for folks with chronic debilitating illnesses. And we should not allow medical marijuana treatment centers and vertically integrated companies, multi-state operators, to be able to doctors or laboratory shop, if you will, to get the results that they want. No different than how we see candidates will shop to show polls that they want. So this is a major concern. Carlos, you touched on this before as a business owner. When you're selling your hemp products, certificates of authenticity matter. And so, tell the folks a little bit about how when they go into your shop, what they may have a different experience around, safety and concerns for purchasing products.
I mean, I don't envy anybody that's trying to get into this business new, because the ability to provide a safe product in the hemp field requires a lot of vetting of different companies and just like understanding how these different companies operate. But I'm in a particularly good situation because some of these companies on my shelf I've worked with for 5-6 years now. But I mean, when you're searching for a product, first off, you want to look for that certificate of authenticity. You want to make sure that they have several certificate of authenticities, and what that means is that they have proof that they're consistently testing their product. You want to make sure that that COA isn't from 2 years ago, right? You want a company that tests every single month or every couple of months, right? Just something constant to make sure that they're finding a consistency in the quality of their product. Right. And then you want to look at customer reviews. I mean, one thing about this business too is if somebody gets a bunk product, they're going to complain about it, and that's going to go online. So look for a product that people stand by and people support, and they're out there, they're out there. Enjoy, Mellow Fellow, things like that. Companies that the customer seems to consistently enjoy.
Well, when we look at where we go with the future of this, right? if Amendment 3 were to pass, if the endorsed candidates that we have, win the election, folks might think, well, what happens next? Well, the very next thing that's going to happen post-election is on December 2nd, there's going to be the rescheduling hearings held by the DEA. Now, should Normal be selected, we're prepared to send our experts up there, to Virginia, in Arlington, where they're having the hearing, and testify that cannabis should not be Schedule 1. It definitely shouldn't even be Schedule 3. We don't want it on the schedule. And Schedule 3 is not appropriate because the way Schedule 3 testing works. But this is going to be an ongoing fight at every level of government until we actually get to the point where we can address these things. Now, folks have given us a lot of shit over the past couple of weeks over our endorsed candidates. And I want to be clear about one thing, is that if you're looking at the top of the ticket, this is Harris versus Trump. I want to take the time to do this compare and contrast with folks, because the Harris campaign came out just in the past week and has pledged to legalize marijuana at the federal level. Now, Harris promises, quote, to work with Congress to ensure safe cultivation, distribution, and possession of recreational marijuana as the law of the land. Now, this pledge comes 2 weeks after an interview where she said, I think we've come to the point we have to understand we need to legalize and stop criminalizing this behavior. Now, Donald Trump has previously declared he intends to vote yes on Amendment 3, and now he's saying if elected, he'll work with Congress to enact reforms at the federal level, including the Safer Banking Act. Now, the guy had 4 years to do that, and he was the same guy who said that guys selling Nick sacks on the corner should get the death penalty.
That experiment in Colorado is not going well. That's something he said before.
Now, if you want to call it a tie, right? Because you're just one of those guys who just can't give Vice President Harris the credit that she's due. As U.S. Senator, Kamala Harris sponsored legislation to end the federal prohibition of cannabis.
But I mean, Cano, as a hemp store owner, I have to put my Republican hat on. And I have to come up with some sort of criticism here. I mean, Kamala spent all that time out in California as an attorney, and she prosecuted so many people for marijuana possession.
Over 2,000 were prosecuted. Out of those 2,000, Carlos, less than 50 saw jail time. She made sure that most folks got some type of diversion. But people like to leave that little talking point out when they want to, lambaste her as being, some super cop that was throwing people behind bars for weed, because it makes for sensational headlines. It comes up great in the debate when Tulsi Gabbard dropped the hammer on her in the primary debates in 2020.
Well, as we wrap this up today, I think we need to tell the audience two things. There's two things you got to do.
I'm going to highlight you, Gary.
The first one,
I feel like it's going to be important.
Okay, there you go. First off, vote. Vote like your life depends on it, like your country depends on it, because it does. Now, if somebody came up to us and said, all we really should be talking about is Amendment 3, no, it doesn't go that way. Yeah, that's your decision to vote on that, and you to vote as you think is right. We've given you as many educational materials as we can, and hopefully we've gotten rid of all the misinformation. Like, for instance, it does not automatically block you from being able to use cannabis in the streets. That's already in law. So don't even go with that one.
They say conflicting shit, because you're like, oh, people are going to be they're not going to be able to smoke in the streets, or you're not going to be able to smoke it anywhere, but it's going to smell like weed everywhere.
Yeah. We have clean air laws. You can't smoke in most places in Florida now.
And also, it does not block home grow. It doesn't discuss home grow. So if you want home grow, which is currently illegal, here comes the number two, what we're asking you to do. We here in Suncoast Normal, Chris has been working on this. Carlos has been working with us. We've been working with other folks to create bills to fix the problems with the laws as they currently stand. And if this goes through Amendment 3, we are going to have a lot of work to do, because there's so many gaps of things that have to get done. That includes public use. That includes that if you have a kid in the house and the only thing they can find is the fact that you use cannabis, they can't take your kids away. Because right now they can, and they will. If you have a medical card right now, they can't take your kids away, even if there's no other issue. And our bill says if that's the only issue, they can't. It's like these kind of things, but we can't do it ourselves. There's only myself and Chris and the people in Suncoast Normal. We need you to just join Suncoast Normal, possibly come with us to Tallahassee, or at least help us let you know how to talk to your own representative and your own senator as to how to pass these bills as we get them filed. And in order to do that, you can be a part of the solution. And that is what Suncoast is about. That is why we put out the endorsement guide, because we need to have the right people in office who will vote for these kind of things. Because if they're just going to be a lackey for the executive branch that tells them not to do these things, things aren't going to get done. So we need to get the right people in office. We need to have the right bills, and we need to have you support them. That's your homework.
And if you don't like the way the endorsements came out, become a member. We're a membership-based organization. Help us craft, be involved politically. Gary would love more folks to be involved in our political committee. Gary would love more folks to come with him to Tallahassee, talk to our senators and such. We're a diverse group. We're a diverse group politically, ethnically, religiously. Folks come from all different backgrounds. That's the reason we exist, is to create a safe space for responsible cannabis users to connect with each other and to address these issues. On that note, we actually have a virtual member meeting coming up this week. So if you want to know about Suncoast NORML, how you can get involved, what's coming up with upcoming elections, you can go to our website, sign up to be a part of our virtual membership committee. There's a Zoom link there that you can RSVP and such, and join us Thursday, 7 o'clock on the 24th. We're going to be on for about an hour and a half talking about these issues, talking about where we're going as an organization and how you can get more involved. Now, being a membership-based organization, our primary function is to do amazing things for our members, which is why we do an annual Halloween bash. Unfortunately, the hurricanes have kind of put a damper on the party spirit right now, but we are still going to hold Halloween 2024 on November 16th at the Dignitary Cafe right on West Shore Boulevard. Now, some of you might be wondering, well, where's Dignitary Cafe? Before you hit the bridge, going over the Gandy Bridge, 4817 Southwest Shore Boulevard is the Dignitary Cafe. So if you're going to come from across the water to St. Pete, if you're going to come from Tampa, it's an amazing spot. There's plenty of parking. We're going to have one hell of a bash and party, and we're still going to have a costume contest on the 16th. So bring your best. You get a replay if your Halloween costume falls as a dud. Come on out. There's going to be live body painting there. There's a cash prize for the costume contest. And we're gonna have music, live entertainment. We're gonna have some amazing food.
Kano,
yes,
it's not just a cash prize. I'm throwing in a Puffco Peak.
Puffco.
Whoa!
I want to compete now. I'm gonna get my costume right. Oh man, I want a Puffco.
I'm glad we had the time, because I know that this was a event that's been developing, and we decided to go with live body painting, which is great, because the cadaver painting, we thought about it first. I don't think it's legal.
Yes, it has to be a live body to body paint. Otherwise, that's just a crime scene tampering.
Yeah, because dead body painting it wasn't a popular thing.
Oh man.
I just wanted to let everybody know that I dropped the link to our virtual member meeting in the chat. Yeah. So if you want to join, you just got to click that link.
Yeah, but if you're watching this on replay on social media, it's right there in the comments. So look, this coming week, we're going to replay this episode. So if you're watching this on the replay, the next time we're going to be live is Sunday, November 3rd. We have very special guests coming up with Senator Jason Pizzo, who's actually suing the state of Florida over using your tax dollars to try and stop Amendment 3 and legalization. And I'm pretty excited headed into the election where folks are. But all in all, right now is the time to start now with the early voting. Get out and vote. If you're voting this weekend, go ahead, go to your local library. If you're in Hillsborough County, go to your supervisor of elections website for your county. Find out where the early voting sites are and what type of ID you need to bring. And then, of course, if for some reason they tell you can't vote, or if you're in the wrong spot, request a provisional ballot. And then clear up whatever your issue is with your SOE within 24 hours after that. So that's
I do want to mention, by the way, acceptable forms of identification when you go out to vote are not just your driver's license or your voter's registration in Florida, but your Florida ID, your passport, military or student ID, debit card or credit card with photo if you have one of those bizarre things. And you can even bring your, believe it or not, Florida concealed weapon or firearms license. This does not mean you should be concealed carrying in the bowls, just so you know. But that you can bring your license, and that will help you vote. So there's ultimate ways you can go ahead and get there and vote legally. Do it.
Basically, like every document that an illegal immigrant can't get is what you need to vote. So We'll see you.
All right, guys.
Catch y'all in the rotation.
That's V's. Vote.
Caption for Mike. All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm glad to see folks switching over from our Zoom portion of our general membership meeting to joining us live for our Amendment 3 debate this evening. For those of you who were just watching us on our general membership Zoom, welcome back. For those of you who are actually tuning in to just the debate portion of our meeting this evening with Suncoast Normal, I'm very excited for this debate. Amendment 3 is a very important vote coming up. I mean, we're already voting. You got with this presidential election, you got folks on the ballot for United States Senate, folks on the ballot for U.S. Congress. You have the Florida State Senate. You have every member of the Florida State Legislature who actually have the power to affect our marijuana laws here in Florida, to actually amend our Constitution. They're going to be the ones who essentially get the football for amendments when they're either passed or address some of the shortcomings that happen when amendments get passed. And so there's a lot to be said about this election cycle. Again, we talked a little bit in our membership portion of our meeting about our endorsement guide. If you want to know about Suncoast Normal's endorsements, you can go to our webpage, suncoastnormal.org, and check out the endorsement guide there and what our political team and our members landed on as far as the best people and best policies to move forward that are on the ballot when it comes to marijuana reform policies. Now, this evening, we have decided after so many media topics and coverage around the amendments, so many politicians who we've never even really heard of their opinions about weed talking about it. When you hear information coming from all different directions at you, and you as a voter just really don't know where you fall at that, we wanted to make sure that you had the opportunity to hear from folks who are actual cannabis advocates, not politicians, folks who are consistently in the trenches fighting for the civil rights of cannabis users in Tallahassee, of cannabis business owners in the state of Florida, and understanding where this amendment is going to move the needle on reforming and policies, how it's going to affect business, how it's going to affect people currently in business, how it's going to affect people who are looking to get into the business, how it's going to affect the existing medical marijuana industry. A lot is going to be affected by this, and that's why you as a voter should be making an informed decision. And whether at the end of this debate tonight you land as pro Amendment 3 or against Amendment 3, whether you're someone who's currently on the fence and you just need more information, whether you've already made up your mind but you really want to hear what your side has to say, this is going to be an amazing, informative thing. I want to again introduce myself. I'm Christopher Cano, the executive director of the Suncoast chapter here of Normal. We have our amazing engineer in the background, our deputy director, Carlos Hermida.
Howdy, I'm here.
Oh, excuse me. Allergies. So, we're of course, our very special guest this evening, the CEO of the Dank of Ganja, Michael Thompson. Michael, welcome.
I'm happy to be here. I'm really excited about this debate because a lot of the debates we've seen across the state of Florida, it's been against pro-legalization versus a complete prohibitionist. And not only are we both for legalization, we both have fought, alongside each other over the years, whether it be white papers, submitting ordinances for decriminalization for well over the better part of a decade. So, we're going to probably agree on a lot of things, but there's going to probably be some heated issues as well. But I'm definitely looking forward to this.
Yeah, Michael, I really appreciate you joining us here at Chillum Hemp and Mushroom Dispensary in Ybor City. And I think just starting out, it's important to also look at the gravity of where we're at right now, right? And being across the street from where cannabis prohibition actually started with Victor Licata back in the 1930s, murdering his family, and seeing Harry J. Anslinger use that case of someone who was schizophrenia, who they found a couple of Nick sacks in his drawer, and that when it was a drought, he couldn't get access to it, and he ended up having a mental episode where there were some deaths involved. And that kind of spurred the reefer madness movement in America and was taken and run with by the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. Here we are, 80 plus years later, still fighting that fight. I mean, the DEA is actually going to look at rescheduling cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 at the direction of President Biden. And that's not even going to happen until December 2nd. So the election's already going to be over and done with by the time the federal government even actually gets off their butt to address cannabis prohibition. So because of the Schedule 1 status of cannabis across the country, the fact that as a Schedule 1 drug, the federal government asserts it has no medical value and has a high penchant for abuse.
Let me interject there. So
Yeah.
you said the word cannabis, right? So
Yeah.
I want all the viewers to understand that there is a differentiation, right? So marijuana, like hemp, is cannabis.
Mhm.
Marijuana is cannabis, but hemp is not marijuana. And amendment, there's so much going on right now with
Yeah.
lobbyists up in DC. So much is weighing on Amendment 3, right?
Yeah.
And if we look at what the 2018 Farm Bill did, it basically legalized 80% of cannabis products. We already have federally legal cannabis legalization.
Really?
Absolutely. And here's the thing. I agree. Nobody should be arrested for marijuana possession, cannabis possession, hemp possession. There's over 16,000 arrests. There was an article that the Tampa Bay Times put out. Originally, they said over 66,000 arrests for simple marijuana possession, but they did have to update that article. It was around 16,000 arrests, and that's something that both Cano and I have both been thrown in a cage, treated like a violent criminal for a simple plant. And what I'm here, what my goal is today is to educate the viewers on what Amendment 3 entails, right? Amendment 3 is not the legalization you would think it is. In fact, the companies behind Amendment 3 have been lobbying to make federally legal cannabis a felony. You can go to smoke shops and federally legal cannabis dispensaries across, just like the one we're in right now, across the state of Florida. You can get higher quality product at a much lower price. You don't have to worry about product shortages. And the state of Florida right now, we have the most restrictive, draconian medical cannabis system in the country. We have some of the highest prices, we have some of the lowest quality, and we have frequent product shortages, especially for good products.
Now your criticism of the current Florida medical marijuana system, you've heard us on the rotation in Suncoast Normal criticize issues from how folks are treated from a labor point of view and the workers to the way the legislature initially set up the system with vertical integration. And so, like you said, we are going to agree on a lot of things. The existing system is not perfect. It was set up initially to have with the Compassionate Care Act in 2014 to just allow CBD businesses to start giving to medical patients. They only set it up for 5 licenses in Florida.
Right. Let's talk about that. In 2014, Hasley Bashir's it was actually revealed by an FBI file that the CEO of one of the major cannabis companies, her husband, we'll just call it Booth Leaf, right? We'll just call the company Booth Leaf. Her husband, JT Burnett, bragged on FBI files. This is public information that his high school friend Hasley Bashir's put in little tweaks while he had his friend Matt Caldwell. And this is important because if you don't study history, you're doomed to repeat it. He had his buddy Matt Caldwell put on a floor amendment. This had the support of the majority of the cannabis community, right? Except for the Colby Wises and what have you. It had the majority of support until that floor amendment. R.I.P. Kobe. Until it had that last minute floor amendment, which created the most restrictive medical market in the country. And it's basically saying, and this was the groundwork, because what happened was John Morgan funded the Florida's largest legalization, medical marijuana legalization effort in Florida history. And the Florida legislature, Rick Scott at the time, wanted to get ahead of it. They wanted to make sure that them and their cronies would be the only ones who would be able to license and sell it. And funny enough, Hasley Bashir's didn't even disclose. He didn't even disclose his financial interest in Simpson Nurseries, which then later became True Leaf.
Wow.
Right. So a complete ethics violation. I mean, who knows how many other violations.
So it definitely sounds like, folks, have heard a lot of information about True Leaf, which is the largest medical marijuana treatment center. They have the most storefronts in the state of Florida. They have the largest market share, if you will. And it seems like, definitely judging from your body language and how you feel, you got to axe to grind, right? Because I know you to be a free market capitalist, right? Like that's what I know about you is like you really do believe in the American values of the free market. I know Carlos is a business owner. He definitely wants to be able to make money and not have to consistently go to the legislature each and every year to worry about getting shut down. I know folks in the hemp industry for the past couple years, have feel some type of way about the legislature. I know as a cannabis advocate, at Normal, we fought against THC caps that floated up about 4 or 5 years ago, and then eventually died out. And then for the last couple of years, it's about the hemp industry and how hemp products should be regulated. Now, let's go back to that 2018 Farm Bill. When it was signed into law by President Trump, it gave a definition of 0.3% THC. That essentially Delta 9 THC. If a product has that 0.3% or less, it is hemp, which is an agricultural commodity, and not marijuana, which is a Schedule 1 controlled substance.
Correct. And if you go to any MMTC, any dispensary, right, in the state of Florida, 80% of their products, 70 to 80% of their products will qualify as hemp. In fact, if you're not familiar with IRS code 280E, some of the companies are exempt from 280E because they're basically telling the IRS, like, hey, look, we're not selling a Schedule 1 narcotic. No, we're selling federally legal cannabis because majority of these products have less than 0.3 Delta 9. Now, let me give you an example. I brought some props here.
And by the way, we're not actually debating right now. We're just getting history and background for you, the voters, to kind of understand of where Florida started when it came to this. We went from being a state that has total prohibition to, in 2014, the legislature adopting a very limited CBD compassionate use law, to Amendment 2, which was defeated in 2014 because it didn't get the 60% threshold to pass as a constitutional amendment. Again, you can thank the state legislature for changing that from a simple majority to, in 2004, they amended the Constitution to say, no, now it needs to be a super majority of 60%. And then in 2016, it managed to get over the top with a 60%. And then the legislature took that amendment and they said, hey, we're going to implement it. So we're going to, this constitutional amendment gives us the power to make more laws around it and create the licensing structure.
Right. And since we're on to that point, Amendment 2, it included all parts of the plant.
Mm-hmm.
So theoretically, the legislature could allow individuals to have clones, potentially grow.
Yeah.
But Amendment 3 specifically excludes those parts of the plant. So I understand that people say, and I understand the argument about the single subject issue, but they could have included all parts of the plant. Right.
Well, let me bring that up on that, because to make it on the ballot, right, you have to go through the Supreme Court review once you get the allotted number of signatures. And the Supreme Court struck down Regulate Florida and Make It Legal Florida. And Regulate Florida had an adult use structure on it. And it also did have the ability to grow your own plants. And they said that it was a violation of the single subject rule. So, the way I understood Amendment 3 being written and how its origin came about was it had to get through the most conservatively stacked Supreme Court that you can expect at the state level in the country. 5 of those justices appointed by Ron DeSantis, who we know is anti-cannabis.
So let me
in a lot of ways.
Yeah, let me specify here. So what I'm talking about, I'm not talking about home grow specifically. I'm talking about a pathway for home grow later on. Amendment 3, there's virtually no pathway in the specific amendment for home grow later on. Whereas with Amendment 2, that included all parts of the plant. Whereas Amendment 3, they specifically excluded that. Now, listen.
There was a court case that decided that, though. It was Joe Redner, who's a friend of the show and a friend of Suncoast Normal, who sued and won in the lower courts that he should have whole access, that he was right with that amendment.
Okay, guys, this is Carlos coming in from the sidelines here. Looks like we went from setup to debate.
And Einstein, Mike here, we lovingly call Einstein at times.
All right.
Has a lot to say. I have a lot to say, but Carlos, thank you for stepping in as our debate moderator and making sure we get back on track, as we were talking about the history of cannabis in Florida, and we're getting off track as to getting into the debate side of things. So Carlos, I know you're a moderator, so go ahead and take us away and jump on the mic here and kind of guide us on this before we go off track.
To our listeners or our viewers, because I'm just off of camera. Unfortunately, we don't have enough space for me to be on camera.
My big behind takes up half.
You know what? I got a big behind myself, and we got to make sure Mike gets in there. So it's okay. You guys don't need to look at me. I'm going to be moderating the debate. We have had a pretty lengthy introduction here, even with some of your individual personal beliefs and thoughts on the amendment and everything. I just want to be very, very clear on these things here. You guys have touched on how you guys are friends and how we're going to have a civil debate already. Particularly here, you guys have both been cannabis activists for a very long time, but particularly here, Mike Thompson has spent a lot of work working on these hemp bills, and for the past 2 years. And I would consider him both to be a hemp advocate and a cannabis advocate as well. So I just want to express to our viewers that we have a very good panel here to get all the topics going. As you guys could tell, they were getting into it before we even got into the debate.
We're passionate guys, and then you know what I said? We're winners, and we don't like losing.
So
and no one wins when cannabis prohibition is the law of the land. It makes everyone losers. Like you said, people get thrown in cages. You know, my own father was diagnosed with a terminal form of dementia. And in my research of wanting to figure out how I could save him, when a doctor tells you your father's got 6 months to live, and there's no other treatments, and then you start to realize, wow, the federal government has a patent on cannabinoids helping people with strokes and Parkinson's and dementia and Alzheimer's, and yet it's still illegal federally. It's a Schedule I drug. Like that does something, you know. And then you become a patriotic, law-abiding American, and you become a criminal because you want your loved one to survive. And then, in 2014, when he was really at his worst, he got diagnosed in 2010. There was no medical system. It wasn't like I could go get a doctor to recommend it and help him. The illicit market, and the connects that you wind up making in college are like the only people you can get access to. And then it was like, you have all this great technology. We're sitting in Chillum hemp and mushroom dispensary right now in Ybor, and I'm looking at glass. I see magical butters up there. I see not just magical butters, but different types of ways and extractors to make different cannabis products and concentrates to help you when you're sick. None of that existed for my dad. And then my dad passed away in January 2017 before the legislature even got a chance to implement the 2016 Amendment 2. So, for me, this is a personal thing of why I got involved and helped create our Suncoast chapter NORML, while I continue even, in his memory and to make sure that what happened to me in the criminal justice system doesn't happen to others. And I'm so proud that you're sitting next to me and as an advocate in Tallahassee in fighting with us alongside for the civil rights of responsible cannabis users.
So here's the rules.
Yes.
I'm not going to put a time limit on anything. I'm going to let you guys finish your whole debate.
And I'm not going to be a jerk and try to interrupt or one up anybody.
However,
if you're making a point, I'm going to let you make your point.
However, I am going to mute you if you aren't being asked a question. All right.
Solid.
So your microphone won't work if I don't speak to you directly.
All right. So Carla's going to be in the background muting and unmuting mics.
So first off, I want to ask directly to Chris Cano as the cannabis advocate on here. What is the most compelling argument to vote yes?
The most compelling argument for me, for NORML and how we feel as an organization to vote yes, is the current felony possession limit in Florida, which I was prosecuted under, was 20 grams. And, in 20 grams or more, it gets you a felony charge. For those who don't know, felony charges can also cause a civil forfeiture. So they can take your car away. They'll take your cell phone. They'll take your laptop. And then if you can't afford a felony lawyer, which is going to be a $5,000 retainer off the top, you're looking at a public defender who might not be able to get you seen in that 10-day window where you can get your stuff back. Civil forfeiture in this country is nuts. And so for me, ending the arrest of people, especially around the high draconian felony threshold in Florida, is important for me to see in an adult use system in the state. And that's why I support Amendment 3, because to me, Amendment 3, the way I'm reading it, is it will change possession limits. Where right now 20 grams is a felony, to up to 3 ounces will be decriminalized. And so that's why I'm supporting Amendment 3, because I want to put an end to those arrests in Florida.
Thank you, Cano. Now for Mike Thompson, what's the most compelling argument to vote no?
I would say that it's 80% of cannabis products are already federally legal, and a tiger doesn't change its stripes. So the same companies that are promoting and pushing, the handful of companies that want their monopolistic privileges that are pushing for Amendment 3, just legislated to take away your right for home grow. That's right. You can grow right now. You can grow federally legal cannabis in the state of Florida. You can get a hemp cultivation permit. You can sell federally legal products. Now, some people would say, oh, well, that's not legal. Well, why did they try to pass SB 1698, which would have actually legislated these things to be a Schedule I narcotic in the state of Florida? So federally legal cannabis hemp flower would have been a felony had these MSOs gotten their way. Fortunately, the governor vetoed this legislation. And what we're seeing now is if we hand this market...
You're not being muted. It just seems like there's a loose wire, Mike. It's okay. Carlos is working on it. Carlos, this mic here is a little loose. You want to give him the other mic?
Testing.
Maybe take that one. Sorry, team. Mike was making a great point there. He was going ham, and then his mic started to act up. So Carlos, who is our engineer, is adjusting it real quick.
Testing.
Nope, that mic's good. So Carlos is flipping that around.
So look, for those of you watching and in the chat, we want you to be able to drop questions. Carlos is going to monitor the chat for questions. Of course, we ask folks to keep it respectful. I know folks are going to have different opinions, but again, this is all about love and legalization. This is about marijuana and the cannabis plant. And so again, be respectful of each other in the chat if you have differences of opinion. But please leave comments. Feel some type of way. If you just feel some type of way about where we're at, you're just a prohibitionist. This may not be the place for you, but again, we encourage folks to be respectful in the dialogue and discourse. And so, Mike, how's that one going?
Testing 1 2.
All right,
Awesome.
yeah.
So as I was saying, as of right now, and I'm telling you right now, the MSOs do not want you to know this.
MSO, maybe you could clarify that.
Multi-state operator.
What's a multi-state operator?
The MMTCs, medical marijuana treatment centers, the dispensaries right now. And what I mean is the marijuana dispensaries, not to be confused with the federally legal cannabis dispensaries, right? The mom and pop. So what they tried to do is they tried to legislate. There's over 10,000 mom and pop businesses here in the state of Florida, a vibrant economy where a lot of companies, we vote with our dollars. We vote with, we purchase products from other advocates. We were able to get a veto from the governor to veto this draconian legislation that was pushed by these cannabis companies, a handful of cannabis companies, 3 of them. We're going to just refer to all of them collectively as Booth Leaf. These companies, if their bill would have passed, it would have taken away your right to grow right now. You can get a permit with the Florida Department of Agriculture to cultivate and grow federally legal cannabis, right? And now there is some contention about the rules, but rules are not the same as laws. Some of those rules that have the redefinition of the total THC are currently being challenged in administrative court. This is why they tried to pass SB 1698. This is very important for voters to understand this because it's basically legal. And if you don't believe me that it's legal.
Oh, he's pulling out a suitcase like Scarface.
I'm going to show you guys something. Okay?
Uh-oh.
So this is federally legal cannabis.
Okay.
Right here.
So that is legal under what you said, the Farm Bill,
2018 Farm Bill.
All right. So it tests out of what to be legal?
It's under 0.3. It was tested
0.3
days prior to harvest.
Okay.
It was tested less than 0.3 Delta 9, but the total THC is probably somewhere around 24%.
Now, when you say total THC, what do you mean as far as total THC? Because
including THCA.
Including THCA.
Right. So if we have a product like Jungle Boys here, right? If we have a Jungle Boys flower,
so
oftentimes
Jungle Boys is a licensed MMTC in Florida.
They're a licensed MMTC. Phenomenal flower, by the way.
Okay.
Boys, from a licensed medical marijuana treatment center. It's virtually the same as what you can get at a mom and pop shop right now.
Really?
In fact, some of their flower would qualify as hemp. Not just them, but Cresco, Cureleaf, Move, a lot of these other MMTCs.
Now, why would they qualify as hemp, Mike?
Because it has less than 0.3 Delta 9. So when you look at the THC percentage, you might say, oh, well, the THC percentage is 27%, right? Well, a lot of times it's the Delta 9 is what dictates, okay, is this marijuana or is this hemp? They're operating under a cannabis license. It's very confusing. And this is done on purpose because they want to trick you into thinking that it's not legal. I wouldn't be having a half a pound bag of flour right here if it wasn't legal. It's already legal, guys. It's already legal. They tried to take this right away from us. Okay. And this is very eerily similar to the mercantile laws, right? If we look at the British naval laws prior to 1776.
Ooh, you're getting some ancient history here for some folks.
This is important because if you don't know history, you're doomed to repeat it.
Now, Mike, Carlos' initial question was why you're voting no. So maybe help us out with this jump from ancient history to federally legal cannabis as to why you're voting no.
To protect our rights as of right now.
Okay.
We already have legal cannabis.
All right.
We already have legal cannabis. And if Amendment 3 were to pass, these companies will consolidate their power. They will make it a felony to have federally legal products. They'll make what I just showed you a felony. Mm-hmm. They will redefine what hemp is in the Florida legislature to protect their interests and the interests of their shareholders. Funny enough, some of their shareholders are former lawmakers, right? And look, Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter. All 40 senators voted to make CBD, over 50 milligrams CBD, a felony, right? All of them did. And in fact, Senator Joe Gruters is on going around the state bragging right now how he's going to create one of the most restrictive recreational markets in the country to protect the monopolistic interests of a handful of companies. And when you have monopolies, this is, we ask ourselves, why is our water poisoned? Why is our food poisoned? It's because we allow this to happen. If we were to use the logic that, hey, you know what, this is just a baby step, we should vote for Amendment 3, we would still be under British rule in this country, right? It takes a handful of people who are brave enough to stand up to the powerful and stand up for the rights of all of us. And this isn't just about cannabis. This is about free markets, because if Amendment 3 passes, you will never get to participate in this industry. You will never be able to get a license. Home grow is not going to happen. You can hear people say, hey, well, we can no, I know how things work in Tallahassee. It's all about money, right? It costs a lot of money to get things done in Tallahassee. If this amendment passes, forget about it. It's going to turn into the R.J. Reynolds Monsanto of cannabis.
That's a lot, but that's your conclusion.
All right, I'm sorry,
Carlos. Could I have a small rebuttal and clarify?
I'm sorry to be. I had to mess with some microphones, but I guess we're gonna share a microphone now. Yes, Kano, I do want you to repeat that.
All right. Well, you asked me why I said, why I support it. I said it's because I want to end the arrest. Mike, you asked him why he doesn't support it, and he definitely gave us a long rundown of he doesn't like a lot of the actors. He doesn't like how the politicians are going. He currently feels as though they're with the hemp products that are currently legal at the federal level, that this amendment is unnecessary. Is that kind of like how you're characterizing it?
It's a hoodwink.
It's a hoodwink. Okay. Now, I have a question when you pulled out these things around these hemp products, because you make this assertion that these hemp products are legal because the THC, the Delta 9, is less than 0.3%. But you mentioned about the overall THCA is around, 27 on some of these products, and that even some of the MMTCs are selling these products. Now, what I found interesting that it is on May 28th, Terrence Booz, the chief DEA's Drug and Chemical Evaluation Section, said that in regards to THCA, Congress has directed that when determining whether a substance constitutes hemp, the Delta 9 THC concentration should be tested using post-decarboxylation or other similarly reliable methods. Now, if that's the case, then when you decarboxylate that THCA, then you're changing that content, and it's going to push you over that 0.3% threshold. So, this is a concern right now, because I want to make sure we're protecting people's civil rights too, and making sure that people don't go to jail for this. So, you mentioned that they're trying to change that right now at the level. That's kind of something they didn't really address in the Farm Bill. The DEA is now weighed in on it. And so when they're looking to reauthorize the 2025 Farm Bill, there's folks lobbying at the federal level for that. So you said some of these folks are existing MMTCs. And again, because those existing MMTCs are also helping fund Amendment 3, and they're trying to shut down these lobbying efforts, that's why you don't support it. I just want to be clarifying your point.
Yeah. So what's happening right now is, and this is from what we've heard from our lobbyists. There's a lot of eyes in DC looking to see what happens with Amendment 3. We've had legislation introduced by Senator Rand Paul to expand the federal legal cannabis market, right, from a 0.3 to a 0.9. And investors are waiting on the sidelines as well. We see a number of MSOs that are now selling, multi-state operators like Cureleaf and GTI, that are now selling federally legal cannabis products across state lines. What you're talking about, though, specifically pertaining to the 0.3 Delta 9 THC and the decarboxylation, in fact, a lot of criminal cases have been thrown out because once they get the judge to understand that, hey, you're literally taking a federally legal product, you're converting it into a Schedule 1 narcotic to get the test result that you want. And a lot of times those charges are being completely dropped. And I will commit to this right now. If Amendment 3 fails, I will be more than happy to fund and sponsor an education program with Suncoast Normal to educate people on the legality of what we currently have right now. Because once people, this is not, they do not want you guys to know this. I'm telling you guys, they are freaking out. They have an entire PR campaign. The PR firms hire and pay the local news stations, and they're trying to scare people into thinking that they even call it intoxicating hemp. It's federally legal cannabis is what it is. And if Amendment 3 fails, the legalization is going to be through the Farm Bill, which makes so much more sense for investors, stakeholders, everyone. But if Amendment 3 passes, what I hate to say this, but what's probably going to happen is we're going to see further market consolidation. more companies buying it, higher prices, fewer choices. And you guys can mention in the comments, if you're a current medical patient, how happy are you with the customer service? How happy are you with the current prices? Do you think that's going to change? If I own a cannabis company, I have a fiduciary obligation to my investors, not the patients, not the customers. So who do you think I'm going to, if I can charge more for an eighth and I only have a limited amount of square footage to grow, who do you think I'm going to put first in the line? I'm going to say, sorry, medical patients, we don't have anything left for you guys. This is under a different SKU under metric. This is going to be for our recreational patients. The same thing happened in Washington. It happened in Colorado. So if you're a medical patient, you're going to be put on the sideline, right? And yeah, so.
Okay. Thank you guys very much. That was all very interesting stuff.
Those are the opening arguments, ladies and gentlemen. That was why are you for and why are you against? Now, Carlos, our debate moderator, is moving into the nitty gritty.
All right. This question is for Christopher Cano. The amendment says MMTCs and other licensed entities will be able to sell cannabis legally. What does other licensed entities mean?
Well, we talked about this in our member meeting. We talked about this a little bit earlier in the setup for the debate. The amendment gives the legislative branch, our Florida legislature, the constitutional power to essentially pass laws that have to do with licensing business entities to essentially sell, cultivate, transport the marijuana for adult use purposes. And so right now, there is existing 23 licenses in Florida. There's a little over 20 licenses that are pending under the current amendment too because of our patient counts. Currently, the existing MMTCs in Florida, the medical marijuana system, is successfully servicing close to 1 million patients, one of the largest medical programs in the country. Now, is the medical system itself doing a good job? Results are mixed. I did read that Wall Street Journal article that was really concerning recently about how a lot of medical marijuana places and multi-state operators around the country have been lab shopping, have been producing moldy bud stuff with pest in it, and that other states that have more stringent testing, that have more competent bureaucrats running their program, seem to have better results. Florida is a product of Florida men and women, Florida man, if you will. And so if you think about how Florida man runs his government, you got a Florida man style currently medical marijuana system in that people are still being fired from their jobs for using medical marijuana. And that's a major concern that people have with it. So for me, looking at the existing MMTCs and what they're going to be able to do, they're going to be able to sell it with Amendment 3. Other licensed entities, basically this language in the amendment gives the legislature carte blanche to break up the vertical integration system that all of us were harping on during the setup, and that we all kind of have beef with when we talk about mom and pop shops wanting to get into this. So this little line right there in the amendment empowers the legislature constitutionally to not just allow the MMTCs to sell though, but choose to license. Now, at Normal, we've been advocating for folks who are hemp business owners, Carlos, like yourself, since you already have a license or a permit with the state of Florida. Maybe those should be the folks who have been displaying, how to operate business properly, how to be good businesses. Mike, you yourself, the CEO of a hemp business, you've been doing a great job following all the rules and such. So I read this line as this could empower the legislature, if they so choose, to essentially give you crack at this system, whether it's if you want to carry your own, if you want to grow your own, cultivate your own. But that's the way I see that question and how that applies to the amendment, Carlos.
Okay, I'm going to have to put time limits down. So Mike, please, 2 minutes.
I can do it less than that. Okay, so we need to look at the legal language, right? So if we're looking specifically, and we're talking about the free market, right? When you don't have a free market, you're depriving the people of Florida of economic opportunity and liberty, right? It says here on page 4 that they may, right? I don't know if you can see that. It says they may. By the way, this is the full amendment. It's 4 pages long, right? This is crazy. So when it comes to issuing new licenses, they may or they may not. A tiger doesn't change its stripes. They'd be in remiss of their fiduciary obligations if they allowed hemp companies to sell their products in the store, or if they were to issue new licenses. You'd think they'd spend $100 million to allow competition? Absolutely not. But when we use the word may, that means you can or you can't. But when we use the word shall, it means that you shall. There's no if, ands, or buts about it. When it comes to civil liability protections on page 1, it says that there shall be subject to, they shall not be subject to criminal or civil liability. So we know that a lot of these companies, the booth factories, are selling moldy products. They're using illegal herbicides, pesticides, plant growth regulators, fungicides, right? This isn't happening in craft growers, right? This is what's happening with these large cannabis companies, and this removes all liability. It's right here. Don't take my word for it. Go read all 4 pages of this amendment.
You just said something just right there at the end that you close out, removes liability. Where does it immunize a company's liability in the amendment? If you could point that out, because I just don't see it.
Okay, guys, we're going to the next question.
Okay.
All right, this question is for.
Well, Carlos, hold on. I want him to answer that because he made a claim.
Yeah. So a medical marijuana treatment center or that other state licensed entity, including its agents and employees acting in accordance to this section, as it relates to acquiring, cultivating, processing, manufacturing, selling, and distributing marijuana products and marijuana accessories to adults for personal use, shall not be subject to criminal or civil liability or sanctions under federal law.
Yeah, so under state law, they wouldn't be prosecuted like you could be prosecuted right now for selling adult use of cannabis. I mean, that's the amendment. The existing statutes also indemnify them against being prosecuted for selling medical products.
This specifically gives them the same protections that vaccine manufacturers.
Okay, guys, we're going to go ahead and move on. All right, this question is for Mr. Christopher Cano. The hemp industry claims that cannabis is already legal with THCA flower. Why are people still getting arrested for cannabis?
Well, the Tennessee Supreme Court really recently had an issue on this. They argued around whether or not you could be stopped by a cop for the smell of cannabis, and because hemp products are legal, that they shouldn't have probable cause to do that. Well, that Supreme Court said, too bad. You really can't tell. The onus is on you. I do know that some folks have commented that the Florida Department of Law Enforcement is running into a lot of issues around testing. There's a backlog of testing and such. A cop smells weed. He is the bureaucrat on the scene. He can decide. You could say it's a hemp product, but unless you actually probably got the original packaging and it's in the original packaging, and then even then, you shouldn't be operating anything that can be intoxicating and operate a motor vehicle in the state of Florida. So there's a lot to be said of whether or not you can smoke a hemp cigar, which is legal, but can you legally operate your vehicle to do that under our existing DUI laws? That's why you still see people going to jail, is because cops smell weed. Probable cause for the cause of smell is still valid in the state of Florida. Now, other adult use states have adopted a legislation after the fact, like Maryland, like Virginia, to remove the smell of marijuana as probable cause. And the problem is that Florida law enforcement officials cannot tell the difference between marijuana and hemp, because they both smell the same, because they're the cannabis plant. It's just this arbitrary number that the federal government came up, which Michael has pointed out. There's folks in the federal government who want to up that number. It's 0.3% THC. As I pointed out, the DEA clarified Delta 9 THC, and the DEA is trying to say that you're pointing around, the THCA. Well, no, now that they're trying to say that it's total post decarboxylation. So if you were to decarboxylate at 27% THCA to get that 27% THC that folks want, the DEA is saying that that's not the case. So there's going to be a lot to be said as how the DEA moves forward, how the 2025 Farm Bill gets written, but Amendment 3 has nothing to do with those federal fights right now. Amendment 3 is specifically for the Florida voters to decide if they want to empower the Florida legislature to amend our Constitution to give them the right to write laws around an adult use system in Florida. Now, Michael clearly has beef with the folks who currently operate in the medical system in Florida, and the amendment does allow the existing medical marijuana treatment centers to start selling essentially over the counter to people 21 and up without a doctor's recommendation. And I want to caution folks on that, in the sense that some folks have this doctor recommendation, and some folks are wondering, if Amendment 3 passes, do I need to continue to get my doctor's recommendation? So there's stuff to be talked about as well in the future about remaining a medical patient in an adult use state. But again, those are things that you didn't actually ask for, that we can talk about at a later time, Carlos.
Okay, Mike, let's get 30 seconds to respond.
So I don't have any beef with any MSOs. The only beef I have are with the companies that are actively trying to legislate away their competition, to criminalize their competition. That's the only beef I have, right? And in fact, if these companies, if they would have done what they did in Arizona, right, they started acquiring some of these federally legal cannabis companies as opposed to trying to shut them down and criminalize them. I think that was a grave miscalculation by the leadership on Amendment 3 was to trying to quietly, at the wee hours, at the very last minute, attack these federal legal cannabis, i.e. hemp companies.
That was exactly 30 seconds. All right, Mike. The amendment does not mention hemp at all. What would it look like for hemp stores if we vote yes?
Well, like I said before, a tiger doesn't change its stripes. So what you'll find is if Amendment 3 passes, the market cap of these companies would skyrocket. They've already spent, millions of dollars on lobbying efforts. They'd probably spend another, who knows, $20-30 million on lobbying efforts. They had over 40 lobbyists trying to shut us down. I wouldn't be surprised if that number jumped up to over 400, an order of magnitude, because they do not want us coming back. So if Amendment 3 were to pass, you would have your rights to grow, your rights to cultivate, sell, everything that's available right now that they don't want you to know about. They want to confuse you by using terms like hemp or intoxicating hemp products. It's federally legal cannabis that we already have right now. Those rights will be stripped away. You would be forced to buy from a company. In fact, I'm going to bring it in for a landing. The company that's behind this amendment, they hire the same lobbying firm that Capital City Consulting that also represents Geo Group, the private prison contractor. So, but from what I'm hearing, they're going to try to put criminal penalties in if you don't have it in the state sanctioned corporate container. And that would make sense, because if they didn't do that, they would be in remiss of their fiduciary obligations to investors.
2 minutes, Kenna.
So everybody has probably seen, and if you haven't, the TikTok video of a cop pulling the guy over, and the guy tells him, "I'm a medical marijuana patient. This is my bud," and him and the cop are going ham. And he goes, "Well, is it in the state-approved container?" And he goes, "No." And the cop tells him, "Well, then you're screwed." So that's the law of the land right now. I don't understand how your assertion that if we pass Amendment 3, this is going to become the additional law of the land. I mean, we have container laws. We have smoke-free workplace laws. We have clean air laws. There's a lot of things that I've heard on the anti folks point of views that have come out in the ether recently that I just kind of stick with me, and I'm just not sure where we get this from, because right now what we see is that consumers don't really care where they get their products from in a lot of ways. People still shop at Walmart and eat at McDonald's. The fact that you have some MSOs that have a huge market share that might not produce the best quality products, well, that seems to be more an issue around competition. Is something the Florida legislature should address by licensing additional businesses. And Amendment 3 clearly says they can license additional businesses. They may do that if they so choose to. So I think that more falls on us, the voters, to make sure that they do license more folks. As a matter of fact, I would go so far as to say the licenses that are currently being held up because of our patient count, there should be 40 some MMTCs in the state of Florida license. And I would like to see us hold Ron DeSantis, the Department of Health, and even Wilton Simpson, the Department of Agriculture, accountable for not making sure those licenses are out there. But I don't see how any of that has to do with Amendment 3 being a bad thing for the people moving forward. So that's my rebuttal, Carlos.
You want to respond? All right, I'll give you 30 seconds.
So the reason why the licenses haven't been issued is because of the Pigford license. The Pigford license was designed in the halls of the shadows of the hallways in Tallahassee, not to help minorities. It was designed specifically to be litigated against to prevent any new licenses. This is why we have a backlog of 22 licenses. Secondly, if they really wanted to help minorities, why would they go after all of the federally legal cannabis businesses, which have a much higher percentage of that are minority-owned businesses than any minority licensing program in the country? So they're just playing lip service. They're trying to hoodwink you guys and fool you. So, yeah.
Exactly 30 seconds again. All right, this is for Mr. Kin over there. If yes on 3 passes, will I still be able to get arrested for cannabis possession, and how?
Well, Amendment 3 changes possession limits. Right now, if you got 20 grams or more on you, you're looking at a felony charge. Less than 20 gram misdemeanor charge, unless you're in a jurisdiction like how we've advocated with normal to have civil citations and some form of decriminalization at the discretion of the arresting officer. So in some cities and counties, around about 11 in the state of Florida, you can get a ticket. And that ticket can range from a small fee to a little bit more heftier fine if a cop so chooses to give you that. So right now, even with medical marijuana, people are being arrested. Again, we talked about earlier, you should have it in your proof container. You shouldn't be smoking in your car. People get arrested because the way our system is written, you should only essentially be smoking and utilizing medical cannabis in the comfort of your home. When it comes to adult use, right? This is another issue that we've seen in other states. In the state of New York, they addressed it to where essentially you can smoke weed anywhere you smoke a cigarette. In Florida, we have clean air laws. We have public use laws. We have you can't smoke within a certain amount of schools and such. Those laws are still going to be on the books, regardless if we pass Amendment 3 or we don't pass Amendment 3. So people can still be arrested, for driving down the street smoking a blunt. Now, as much as freedom loving advocates may want to do that, that's still going to be the law of the land. So Amendment 3 again is only going to allow you to essentially smoke within your safety of your own home. If you got a landlord and your landlord doesn't like it, they could still take action against you, because the Florida legislature and Ron DeSantis is not like they're pro renters' rights, and so there's definitely a lot to be said about. We've seen people getting kicked out of their nursing homes for using medical cannabis, and that's why we want to advocate and continue to advocate for ending medical discrimination. People get kicked off the organ transplant list in Florida. People get kicked off of their pain management plans. People get kicked out of the nursing home, all for using currently legal licensed cannabis, whether that's hemp or whether that's their medical marijuana that they have a card for. So, Amendment 3 addresses a lot around possession limits. If it's in its approved container, you just bought it, I don't see why you should be getting pulled over and arrested on that. And then even then, it doesn't really say anything in the amendment about approved containers. The amendment just clearly says up to 3 ounces. The container side of things and all that is other statutes that can be addressed. And all that, again, this amendment empowers the Florida legislature to fix those shortcomings. Nothing in this amendment prohibits the legislature from enacting laws that are consistent with the amendment. So, if you don't like how the legislature enacts the amendment, then and passes laws to adjust it, pay attention to our endorsement guide, get involved in the legislative process. But again, I don't think that's a good enough argument to strike down the amendment.
Mike, you got 1 minute.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, cannabis is already legal, right? You have the opportunity to start a business right now, open a federally legal dispensary, cultivate, grow, sell, distribute. There's plenty of stores.
I'm going to stop you right there. It's not on what's going on now. If the amendment passes, right, how could you still get arrested for cannabis?
Okay, so if we're talking about that, if the amendment passes, how could you still get arrested? Okay, so I would say, a lot of that has to do with, look at how the prior implementation legislation was put in. They put the shareholders and the billionaire class first, before the people, before the voters, before the mom and pop businesses. So if we think like that, right, it's very, very likely, I can't say definitively, but if we look at the language of the amendment, that it will be criminal penalties if it's not in a corporate approved container. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people are just going to assume that it's completely legal willy-nilly. There's nothing you can, do about it, and they're going to get busted thinking that it's legal, and then cops are just looking, to get them on something, and then they're still going to use the smell of cannabis as probable cause, because they don't know if you have more than 3 ounces or not. And by the way, federally legal cannabis, there's no limit on how much federally legal cannabis you can have. But it's, with this amendment, that codifies that to 3 ounces.
Just a quick rebuttal, Carlos.
Sure.
I hear this claim that Mike's bringing up, and once marijuana is legal, arrests are not going to go up. You can't point to one single adult use state, regardless of licensing things that we're talking about, or approved containers, where arrests go up post legalization. But again, right now, arrests are happening. Felony arrests are happening for more than 20 grams, and this legalizes up to 3 ounces. And this will eliminate tens of thousands of misdemeanor arrests and felony marijuana-related arrests in the state of Florida, and that's why I support it.
Before we continue, I just want to tell all of our viewers to please drop any questions you may have in the chat. There's a lot of arguing in the chat right now. If you want to get a question in, if you're, want to put your point forward or something like that, please drop it in the chat, because I've only got a few more questions. 30 seconds.
Yeah, so for those of you in the comment section that are, say, the Farm Bill argument, there was actually an attorney, a well-known attorney who's been an advocate, and he actually mentioned that if you say it's hemp, the burden of proof is on the state now, because of those cases that have been getting dropped because they're decarboxylating, they're converting that federally legal product into a Schedule I narcotic. Once the judges understand that, cases are getting dropped. But to your point, Cano, about arrests going up or down, In general, I think you're right, but I've never seen, like, I really do. I think you're right, but I've never seen. Let's look at let's just assume that arrests do go down. Look at the economic ramifications of those people who aren't going to get arrested versus removing the free market, right? Depriving the people of Florida of economic liberty and opportunity. I would argue that pales in comparison to those arrests. And secondly, we've never seen a state have both a private prison contractor and the author of the amendment team up and hire the same lobbying firm. And I'm not trying to get into conspiracy theories here, but this is Florida. And Florida is well known for their private prison contractors implementing and lobbying for mandatory minimum sentences for nonviolent crimes.
I just can't rectify around my head continuing arresting folks on these crazy felony charges when, like I said, the one thing the amendment clearly does is it change possession limits, which 20 grams is currently a felony, to up to 3 ounces being decriminalized. For the vast majority of cannabis consumers, most people don't roll with 3 ounces on them. You know, you might have an ounce bag, you might get a lid from the plug. I'm just being colloquial here, but I don't see how continuing this back and forth on the possession thing is like, you say, hey, there's this one thing about the bill I don't like, and I don't, the free market is important, and I don't trust the state of Florida and the politicians. I don't trust the state of Florida and the politicians. But what I do trust is the fact that if we, the voters, pass this amendment, it changes what caused me to go to jail. In effect, and Carlos can attest to this, me being a really irritable person for having to go to rehab for a whole year and dishing out 15 grand because of these felony charges to get my record expunged, versus this won't have to happen to people anymore. Especially not someone who just came from his grandma's house for making sure grandma's got her weed and then wants to take it home to his sick dad, and you only got half an ounce on you at best.
And this next question is for you, Kano. Why would Truly fund this amendment for so much money? They spent millions of dollars. Why would they do
that? Market share, man. I mean, no amendment, grassroots style amendment in the state of Florida gets passed through 22 million voters to get in front of them without some type of financial backing. John Morgan backed it in the medical amendment, and some people are like, well, did he do that out of kind of his heart? He had a great story with his brother Tim, and God rest Tim's soul, of how he felt about that. But I also know that some people point out he's also a shareholder in some of the MSOs that exist today. Trulieve is a business, and they're about making business. And again, this opens up their market right now. They only have 1 million potential customers in the medical marijuana market. As an adult use market, this would open up that possible customer base to the 22 million Floridians and the other 330 possible million Americans coming here on vacation and stuff who won't need to show a medical marijuana license from the state of Florida, medical marijuana card, to get access to their products. So, if people are asking, why would a corporation who, gets the ability to sell to anybody, to 330 million plus people, when they currently can only sell to a possible million, would fund something like this? I mean, it's like Mike said, it's free market. It's the American way. Money in politics. If you don't like money in politics, then take it up with the U.S. Supreme Court and their decision in Citizens United. But for right now, businesses have a lot to say of how they push things along and what they want to have. Again, this opens up the market for the MNTCs who are all competing right now, 23 licenses, over 1 million people, to open it up to 22 million people each and every day, and the millions of tourists that come here.
Mike, let's give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, so I would say, like I said, the tiger doesn't change his stripes. But my biggest point this evening is to let you guys know that 80% of cannabis is already legal, right? And I know there's executives and MSOs that are feeling like nails on chalk every time I say that, because they don't want people realizing this. You can go online, you can order it. It's all federally legal. You won't have to compromise your Second Amendment rights. My issue is with this amendment is not legalization. This amendment hands over monopolistic privileges to companies that have a history of lobbying and trying to legislate away their competition and turning them into criminals, and I spoke in front of the Florida House. I spoke in front of a number of different committees, and I said, look, if you guys pass this bill, you're going to be creating millions of new felons, right? And if this amendment passes, that's one of my concerns of arrests going up. Because if somebody orders a CBD or a federally legal THC product and it gets it in the mail, and they get their way, if their new version of SB 69 comes into pass with Amendment 3 passing, those people, they don't know better. It's highly likely to be a criminal charge had they gotten their way the first time around. So, this the crime of depriving people of economic liberty and freedom. And if you think that they're going to legislate horizontal integration or work with the hemp companies, I got a bridge in the green swamp to sell you.
Well, but on that point, Mike, just going back there, it clearly says right here that he may license other entities other than MMTCs. That clearly shows me that they can the legislature is being empowered by Amendment 3 to take down vertical integration if they want to.
Okay, guys, I know you guys are heated about that, but I think we need to move on.
All right, thank you, debate moderator.
Well, 30 seconds.
Less than that. So let's look at all 4 pages. Look at how many times they use the term shall, and look at when they use may. One of the only times they use may when it comes to issuing new licenses. Almost everything else is shall. So
okay, guys.
You shall not cover your neighbor's wife, but you may cover your neighbor's wife. I mean, what were we arguing about?
Okay, guys. All right. We have some questions in the comments now. However, some of them are not exactly pertaining to the amendment, things like reciprocity or whatnot. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about why should I vote yes on when I cannot home grow. Kano.
Can you grow a home right now? No, right? But this changes, it ends tens of thousands of arrests in the state of Florida, right? And explain to me what state has passed home grow before they passed adult use. See, there's crickets on that for all across the board, because that's where we're at right now. Like the legislature, California,
Washington, Oregon.
The legislature is in Florida. The Florida man legislature, run by good old Ron DeSantis, is not going to pass any type of restorative justice measures, and they're not going to grant additional freedoms until you normalize the crimes that people are being prosecuted for. You know what? If Amendment 3 doesn't pass, you know what else we're not going to see besides home grow? You're not going to see people getting records expunged. You're not going to see pardons. You're not going to see clemency. You're not going to see people released out of the cages. But that's nowhere in the amendment either. So I'm not going to tank this amendment and vote against it because, again, people who are being arrested right now, people like myself who have really been affected by this, who have their families affected by it, will see the alleviation under the law because, again, 3 ounces or less is going to be decriminalized. For folks who have issues around how the licensing structure is, it does constitutionally enable the legislature to go ahead and break up vertical integration if they want to. If you got an issue with how the legislature operates, don't tank the amendment because you don't like the politicians. Replace the politicians. That's my point, Carlos.
This question is for Mike. The vertical integrated system of Florida. I'm sorry, I was reading the wrong one. Does the amendment establish licenses for non-vertically integrated systems?
No, it leaves it open, but it's if the last 8 years were any indication, it's highly unlikely. I'd like to add something. I do have a point of contention on the home grow. Technically, home grow is legal right now. You can go to FDAX. In fact, FDAX deleted this from the website because they don't want you to know about it. But you can get a federally legal cannabis cultivation permit, i.e. hemp cultivation permit, from FDAX. The company behind this amendment lobbied and tried to legislate this right away from you to make it a felony. They tried to make this illegal. Okay, I wouldn't be holding half a pound here of federally legal cannabis, right? If Amendment 3 passes, that will be a felony. You will not be able to do that. I mark my word.
I'm gonna live in here,
right? This is if we look at the Whitney Economics Report, we have a massive federal legal cannabis industry here in the country, quite possibly one of the largest. Okay, they don't want you guys to know this. It's already legal, guys. I'm not kidding. And what could possibly happen if Amendment 3 were not to pass? We would see something similar to the beer and wine licenses and liquor licenses, right? The groundwork for legalization is already here through the 2018 Farm Bill.
Can I get a small rebuttal, Carlos?
Yes, sir.
So if you get pulled over tonight with this, do you have the paperwork to show that this is all legit?
I do.
So that's the thing, right? Most people are not as smart as you, brother. Most people are not educated voters, right?
I have a license.
You got a license for this, right? And you're encouraging people to go get licenses, right? And that's cool. But why tank this amendment? Like you said, when you can already get a license for it now, it seems like, oh, well, it doesn't have home grow. You can home grow it yourself now. Okay, so then why are you tanking this amendment? Why are we continuing to support arresting people for marijuana?
Okay, guys. Okay. All right. We got another question going. Since the medical program has been exempted from taxes, are we expecting an excise tax of 30% like Cali? Go for it, Kano.
The legislature is going to decide what that tax rate is, and again, I say again, this is why we made an endorsement guide this election, because who sits in those seats has all the power. Who we elect to the legislative branch of government has the most power in our structure of government in the United States of America, whether that's at the state level or the federal level. A lot of the issues that we have around marijuana being a Schedule I drug, again, Congress can change this tomorrow. We've caught a lot of flack at Suncoast Normal for endorsing Kamala Harris, but when she was a United States Senator, she sponsored the MORE Act, the only bill that I've seen actually get a vote in 80 years of Congress to remove cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act. Whether you like her other politics or not, I can tell you that issue there is important to cannabis consumers. And if you're a cannabis consumer, I encourage you to educate yourself by going to our website and seeing who the people in the legislature that are up for office and up for election are, because those are the ones going to implement it. Those are the ones going to make that decision. And so I don't want to see us overtaxed. I don't want people going back to the illicit market. I want a robust market in the state of Florida. Again, the legislature is being empowered. We, the people, are voting on these specific things in this Constitution Amendment to empower them to address this. Now, if they don't address it the way we want it, that's why we have elections. We got to go ahead and change them. They say politicians like diapers. They should be changed often for the same reasons.
Rebuttal, Mike.
Yeah, so I would say this, it's a plan. It should be legal. It's already mostly illegal, right? If we give them monopolistic privileges to the same companies that tried to make this a felony, what do you think is going to happen? It's like a plan. It's like tomato. How are you going to sit there and say like, oh, I'm the only one who can sell tomatoes. Screw you. I'm going to throw you in a cage and treat you like a violent criminal. That's exactly what Amendment 3 will do. It'll further consolidate power. The quality will go down, right? You won't have the freedom to start a business. I don't know what Kool-Aid you're drinking to think you might have a chance of doing that. Forget it. Right. Secondly, home grow is not going to happen because they have a history. They tried legislating away our federally legal cannabis program here in the state of Florida to make it a felony where you can't do that. This is why they tried to codify it from a rule to a law. We're talking specifically pertaining to the rules implementing the 2018 Farm Bill. So I do not trust these people. Right. I do not trust them. You will look back in history, just like I said, with the mercantile laws and the British Naval Code, right? If we were using the same logic like it's just a baby step, we should vote in the right direction, we would still be under British rule today.
Look, it is far more likely that lawmakers would address home grow post-legalization than in a state that just rejected legalization. So I don't get the vote against it because it doesn't include home grow, and we'll never see home grow argument. It just don't make sense to me.
Okay, guys. I think we're at our closing arguments. Who wants to go first? I don't know who to put first.
I opened up, so Mike, I'll give you the.
I'll go. I will always fight for free markets and cannabis legalization. And I will say this. I will close with this. We already have federally legal cannabis. Amendment 3 just empowers the people that have a history of already trying to legislate away their competition and your rights to start a business, right? I think it's a crime against humanity to sit there and say, hey, I'm the only one who can grow tomatoes, but once you give me the right to be the only one to grow tomatoes, I'm going to make sure next time that I'm going to legislate and make sure that you guys are criminalized to ever have a right. And I would just urge the voters to don't take my word for it. Don't take Cano's word for it. Read all 4 pages of the amendment yourself, right? And understand history and understand when you deprive people of free markets, you rob them of the economic mobility, and free markets have destroyed poverty more than anything else in our nation's history. Please vote no on Amendment 3.
Okay, Cano, closing argument.
I just don't understand the outrage over Amendment 3 failing to address home grow when the medical cannabis constitutional amendment did not explicitly say anything about home grow, and its lack of inclusion was not even an issue when we were all saying, yes, we want to move to a medical cannabis system. Now we're saying, yes, we want to move to an adult use system. A lot of folks don't like the fact that they have to spend $200 and some odd out of pocket to get a doctor's recommendation. They just want to walk in and be able to buy it, just like you can here with the federally legal cannabis cannabis that Mike has been talking about. And then even then, this is a state issue. We, the people of the state of Florida, want to buck the federal government essentially by adopting adult use system, much in the way half the entire country has also adopted adult use laws to buck the system. Now, in those adult use laws, it ranges on the political spectrum of liberal to conservative. Florida is a conservatively dominated state. We got a conservative constitutional court. We got conservative laws. You got conservative lawmakers. If you don't like the way the lawmakers have designed this conservatively oriented system, if you want to see it to be a more liberal oriented system, if you want more civil liberties and more freedoms, then we need to elect the right people in office on the legislative side of things. But what this amendment clearly does is it changes that felony limit of 20 grams, which is less than an ounce for those of you out there, which people are being prosecuted and arrested in Florida right now. And it decriminalizes up to 3 ounces. It also decriminalizes up to 5 grams of concentrate. And I know folks have gone back and forth of whether or not any amount of concentrate in Florida is a felony. I know there's been lawyers out there that have been arguing against that and fighting for patients who have been pulled over, and folks have been arrested for having concentrates. I know that there's grandmothers who have been arrested at Disney World under the current system that we have. People come on vacation and leave on probation in Florida. But if we change these laws, what we will see is arrests go down. If we adopt Amendment 3, we'll see arrests go down. If we adopt Amendment 3, we will normalize cannabis legalization in the state of Florida. We will give some of those politicians that have not have what we like to say in Spanish, the cojones, or political will, the testicular fortitude to be forthcoming on cannabis legalization. And we may actually see them in an adult use system also address the shortcomings of the medical system that we have, because this is something that is going to be a hot topic next legislative session. But if we don't pass Amendment 3, they're not going to address none of these things next legislative session. Our battle is going to be that much harder and that much uphill to fight for. Again, I see it as this. How do you expect a home grow to happen if we don't normalize and legalize it first? How do we expect people to be released out of cages, locked up in cages, to get clemency, to get pardons, to get their records expunged, to be able to hold security clearance and government jobs if we don't normalize the crime that people are being hit for? And again, these possession limits in Florida are some of the most draconian. Amendment 3 changes these possession limits to where the vast majority of cannabis consumers would no longer be arrested for the possession charges that they're getting. And if you read the amendment, it also addresses the paraphernalia issue. So Amendment 3 also legalizes paraphernalia for adult use. And so people so often get a combination charges when they get arrested because they have a pipe or they have some other apparatus that they use to consume their cannabis. And again, I want to say to folks, Mike talked a lot about history tonight in what he had to say. I look at history and I look at the civil rights movement. And if Martin Luther King told me that he was going to not support the Civil Rights Act of 1964 because it didn't have voting rights in it, when they passed the Voting Rights Act in 1965, we might be looking at a totally different society in America. What I hope is that in 2 to 3 years, we can look back at this time, we can all laugh. And if we pass Amendment 3 and the voters get out there and support it, that we can look back and see a Florida where people are no longer arrested for weed. That we can see a Florida where people are actually growing it at home, that we're not losing our jobs for using it, that we can end urinalysis testing in the workplace, that people can be potheads or former potheads and still hold government jobs. Maybe not the ones with the nuclear codes or the ones driving the kids to school, but at least, working the desk jobs and such. I really think that Amendment 3 is the next step in logical evolution of public policy. And you know why the amendment exists in the first place? Because the Florida legislature has not had the political will to do it. We, the people, have to get out there and actually vote on it this go round. And here we are. We've had these companies funding it. We've had people from all across the state funding it. Who's also funding the No On movement? Folks who aren't even a part of Florida. With folk multi-billionaires who are allies of Ron DeSantis. And what really pisses me off on the grand scheme of all this is that Ron DeSantis has actually spent our tax dollars to advocate not just against Amendment 3, but other constitutional amendments that he doesn't agree with politically. And so that's something that I think folks should also pay attention to and be upset with, is that regardless of where you stand on yes on 3, no on 3, if you're undecided, that our government should not be using our tax dollars to advocate one way or the other on these political causes. I am going to vote Amendment 3. Suncoast Normal is supporting Amendment 3. It does something very clear in our point of view that changes the possession limits, which are going to end tens of thousands of arrests in the state of Florida. And the arrest data in Florida is actually underreported to the FBI if it's not even reported at all. So, Florida law enforcement right now is running rampant on stomping on constitutional rights. A lot was said tonight about rights and free market economy, but there is no more right that's trampled on right now than the civil rights of people who are smoking weed each and every day. And I'm going to vote yes on Amendment 3 because I want to see those folks live in a Florida where they're not arrested.
Well, are you guys still friends?
Of course.
All right, I'm going to show my face for the camera here. I've been here this whole time. Thank you guys for joining us. That has been the Amendment 3 debate.
And before we close out the stream, we do got some announcements to make on behalf of Suncoast Normal. For those folks who heard this debate tonight and you want to get more content like this, we at the Suncoast Chapter Normal and the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws encourages all responsible cannabis users to get out there, to donate their time, their treasure, their talent, become a member of Normal at the national level, become a member of our chapter here locally. We cannot move the ball forward on public policy unless we come together and that we're organized, and Normal gives us a space to do that. It gives us a space to find like-minded people. It gives us a space to actually come together when we disagree on things politically and in a civil way be able to discuss them, to educate the public on them. And so each and every Sunday we continue to have a show where we're showcasing candidates. We'll talk about the latest in cannabis reform policy, news and entertainment. Mike, I know you've been on the rotation many times on Sunday. Carlos donates his time and this amazing space here at Chillum Hemp and Mushroom Dispensary so we can have the rotation. Tune in this Sunday. We're actually going to have Senator Jason Pizzo, who's actually up for re-election, and he's currently suing the state of Florida over using our tax dollars to fight against Amendment 3 and Amendment 4 on these issues. So we'll see how his lawsuit turns out against Ron DeSantis using tax dollars to try and stop Amendment 3. Tune in this Sunday at 11. For those of you who again want to support this coming Sunday, November 3rd, yes, yeah, exactly. This coming Sunday, you're going to get to watch a replay of this and some of the other candidate interviews that we've had. So tune in. You can watch that on our social media channels and such. But look, we also want to make sure folks have fun, right? We are a member-driven organization. We're a 501c4 nonprofit, and our primary objective is to make sure that cannabis users have a safe space, that their civil liberties are protected, that they can meet with like-minded folks. We do a lot of member-driven events. And on November 16th, we're actually hosting our annual Halloween costume contest. Now, Tampa Bay just experienced 2 major hurricanes in the last couple of weeks. And so we, didn't feel it was right with the way looking at the devastation that folks are feeling, that local businesses have had, that even our event venue has taken at the Dignitary Cafe. And shout out to Ian Beckles at the Dignitary Cafe for hosting this. I know they're still trying to get the reconstruction done and get things remodeled in time. So we moved the Halloween costume contest from, this weekend, which was coming up on Saturday, to November 16th. So we're still going to have the opportunity to come out. You can have live body painting. You're going to have a cash prize on the contest. Carlos actually has donated a Puffco Peak on behalf of Chillum. So enter into the contest. Bring your best costumes. If you're someone who is a vendor, you got a business that you want to showcase among the Suncoast Normal membership. If you want to be a sponsor of the Halloween party, by all means, get in touch with us. Reach out to us on our website or email us at info@suncoastnormal.org. And again, we thank you, but we cannot do this amazing programming without you, our members, our future members, our potential members. So donate your time, donate your talent, donate your treasure. Go ahead and become a member. Make a donation to Suncoast Normal. Donate to National Normal for the great, amazing work they're doing at the federal level and in the court system. Even if you're a lawyer and you're out there listening, in December, at the first week of December, we're actually going to have the Key West Legal Conference, which National Normal has put on for over 30 years. And so if you need some continuing legal education credits, or if you don't need a CLEs, even if you're not a lawyer and you're interested in networking with like-minded people who are in the cannabis space, come on down to Key West. It's a great time. The Pure House for over 30 years has been hosting normal legal conferences. And again, I encourage folks to get involved, get out there, regardless of how you feel after this debate tonight, whether you're pro, you're against, you're still undecided, make sure you get out and vote. Early voting is happening right now, and we're not going to see any change on around policies in this state unless we actually change the people in power and unless we change the policies that those people are empowered to enact. And that's all I got to say this evening, Carlos. I want to say again, thank you, Michael, for coming on the show, and we hope to have you on future shows.
And thank you guys very much. Thank you, everybody that tuned in.